Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to the Fiction Wizard, your story destination. We have an absolute treat for you today. What if Harry was sorted into Slytherin? Everything changes if you're enjoying these stories. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the stories coming. With that said, let the adventure begin. Chapter 1, Green and Silver, Slytherin. The great hall fell silent. The word hung in the air like a spell gone wrong. Harry Potter sat frozen on the stool, the ancient sorting hat still perched atop his unruly black hair. He'd been so sure, so absolutely certain, that Gryffindor would be his home. Professor McGonagall cleared her throat and gently removed the hat. Her face betrayed nothing, but her eyes flickered with something: surprise, disappointment, before returning to their usual stern composure. "Mr. Potter, please join your housemates," she said quietly. Harry stood on wobbly legs. The Slytherin table had erupted into confused murmuring rather than the enthusiastic cheers the other houses had given their new members. He caught Hagrid's bewildered expression at the staff table before forcing himself to walk toward his new house. His new house. Slytherin. The home of Voldemort. As he approached the table adorned with green and silver, Harry noticed Draco Malfoy, the arrogant boy from Madame Malkin's and the train, making space beside him with an expression of shock giving way to smug satisfaction. Harry hesitated. The last thing he wanted was to sit next to Malfoy, but the rest of the table seemed equally unappealing with older students watching him like he was some rare specimen in a jar. "Over here, Potter." A lanky, brown-haired boy slid sideways, creating room further down the bench. His face remained neutral, neither hostile nor particularly friendly. "Theodore not." Harry gratefully took the offered spot, putting a buffer between himself and Malfoy's group. "Thanks," he muttered. "Don't mention it," Not replied, turning his attention back to the sorting. The ceremony continued, but Harry barely registered the remaining names. His mind raced with questions and second thoughts. Had the hat made a mistake? He'd practically begged it not to put him in Slytherin, and yet here he was. Weasley, Ronald. Harry watched as the red-headed boy he'd shared a compartment with approached the stool. Ron looked green with nerves, especially after witnessing where Harry had ended up. The hat barely touched his head before shouting, "Gryffindor." Ron's relief was palpable as he joined his cheering brothers. "Not surprised there," muttered an Italian boy sitting across from Harry. "Weasleys have been Gryffindors for generations. I'm Blaise Zabini, by the way." "Nice to meet you," Harry replied automatically, watching Ron join the Gryffindor table where he was immediately welcomed with slaps on the back and warm smiles. No one had greeted Harry that way here. After the last student was sorted, Headmaster Dumbledore rose to deliver a brief, eccentric speech before the feast appeared. The incredible spread of food momentarily distracted Harry from his predicament as golden plates filled with more delicious options than he'd ever seen. "So, Potter," Malfoy called down the table, "seems you've got better taste than I thought." Harry stabbed a roasted potato with unnecessary force. "The hat decides, not me." "Obviously it saw something in you," Draco smirked. "Blood will tell." "What's that supposed to mean?" Harry challenged. Theodore Not cleared his throat. "He means you're a half-blood, not Muggle-born. Slytherin rarely takes the latter. And that matters because..." Harry left the question hanging. The surrounding Slytherins exchanged glances ranging from amused to incredulous. "You really don't know anything, do you?" a pug-faced girl asked. "I'm Pansy Parkinson. And yes, it matters to some people. Not to everyone," Blaise Zabini interjected smoothly. "But tradition and heritage are valued here. You'll learn." Harry focused on his plate, appetite diminishing. He'd been so excited about Hogwarts, about finally belonging somewhere. Now he felt more out of place than ever. "Don't look so glum, Potter," Not said quietly while the others launched into a discussion about their families. "Slytherin's not what everyone says. We take care of our own." And I'm one of your own now? Harry asked skeptically. Nott shrugged. The hat put you here. That makes you a Slytherin, whatever anyone expected. Harry glanced up at the staff table. Hagrid caught his eye and gave a small, confused wave. Next to him sat a hook-nosed professor with greasy black hair who was staring at Harry with undisguised intensity. Their eyes met, and a sharp, hot pain shot across Harry's scar. Who's that talking to Professor Quirrell? Harry asked, rubbing his forehead. Professor Snape, an older student answered. Head of Slytherin House and Potions Master. Fair warning, he favors us, but he's still tough. He doesn't look very happy to see me, Harry observed. The older student snorted. Snape doesn't look happy to see anyone. But that's actually his interested face. Probably surprised the famous Harry Potter landed in his house. The feast concluded with Dumbledore's announcements, including a strange warning about the third-floor corridor being off-limits to anyone who didn't wish to die. While other students laughed, Harry noticed several Slytherin prefects exchange calculating looks. First years, follow me, called a tall prefect with perfectly styled hair. Stay together and try not to embarrass us on your first night. The Slytherin first years fell into formation behind the prefects while the other houses scattered toward different parts of the castle. Harry walked beside Theodore Nott, acutely aware of Malfoy and his two large friends, Crabbe and Goyle, close behind. Unlike the excited chatter from the Hufflepuffs they passed, the Slytherin group moved with practiced decorum. We're heading to the dungeons, the female prefect announced. Remember the route. We won't be giving tours all week. They descended deeper into the castle, passing through corridors that grew progressively dimmer and cooler. Torches with green-tinged flames illuminated the stone walls where occasional serpentine carvings caught the flickering light. The entrance to our common room is concealed, the male prefect explained, stopping before an apparently ordinary stretch of damp stone wall. The password changes every fortnight, so keep track. This week's password is Ascendancy. As he spoke the word, a hidden door in the wall slid open, revealing the Slytherin common room. Harry stepped through behind Nott, trying to mask his surprise. The long, low underground room was bathed in greenish light cast by lamps hanging on chains from the ceiling. A fire crackled in an elaborately carved mantelpiece, around which several high-backed chairs sat occupied by older students. Windows revealed the darkness of water, they were partially under the lake, Harry realized, and occasional shadowy movements suggested creatures swimming past. It's not the tower view the Gryffindors get, Nott commented quietly, but it has its advantages. Like what? Harry asked, still uncertain about the dungeon aesthetic. Privacy. Security. Nott nodded toward an alcove where two seventh-years appeared to be practicing wand work without supervision. Freedom. The prefects directed the first years to gather around before the fireplace as the rest of the house filtered in. The common room filled quickly, many students clearly curious about their unexpected new housemate. Harry felt dozens of eyes evaluating him. Welcome to Slytherin House, announced a sixth-year prefect. For those who don't know, I'm Gemma Farley. Before Professor Snape arrives for his welcome address, let me explain a few things. Slytherin has produced more successful witches and wizards than any other house. We expect you to uphold that tradition. Outside these walls, the male prefect continued, we present a unified front. Whatever disagreements you have with fellow Slytherins stay inside the common room. The other houses are already against us, we don't need to give them ammunition. Harry shifted uncomfortably. He'd barely been sorted, and already there was talk about the other houses being against them. Our house values ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness, Gemma continued. We don't rush in without a plan. We don't show all our cards. And we certainly don't lose points through foolishness. The stone door slid open again, and the room immediately fell silent. Professor Snape swept in, his black robes billowing behind him. His dark eyes scanned the room, pausing fractionally on Harry before addressing the assembled students. Another year begins, he said softly, yet every word carried clearly. To our returning students, I expect continued excellence. To our newcomers, his gaze swept over the first years, Slytherin is not merely your house, it is your family for the next 7 years. You will find that membership has both privileges and responsibilities. Snape paced slowly before the fireplace. Slytherin rewards those who demonstrate intelligence, determination, and discretion. Childish behavior, public rule-breaking, and foolhardy stunts will not be tolerated. Unlike other heads of houses, I do not coddle. His eyes found Harry again. Fame and reputation are meaningless here. Your actions alone will determine your standing. Harry stared back, refusing to look away despite the professor's intimidating demeanor. Something like surprise flickered across Snape's face before he addressed the entire house again. Prefects will distribute schedules tomorrow at breakfast. First years, your dormitories are down the left corridor. Classes begin promptly at 9, lateness reflects poorly on our house. Dismissed. As the gathering dispersed, Harry followed Nott and the other first-year boys toward their dormitory. The corridor branched several times before the prefect stopped at a door labeled, First Years. Your trunks have already been delivered, he said before leaving them. The dormitory contained 5 four-poster beds with green silk hangings and silver fastenings. Unlike the common room's grandeur, the bedroom felt almost cozy, with the lake light casting gentle ripples across the stone ceiling. Harry found his trunk at the foot of a bed between Theodore Nott's and Blaise Zabini's, with Malfoy and Goyle taking the beds opposite. Crabbe, he learned, was in a different dormitory with 2 other Slytherin boys. Well, Draco drawled, flopping onto his bed, this is an interesting development. Potter in Slytherin. Wait until my father hears. Is that your solution to everything, Malfoy? Harry asked, unpacking his pajamas. Running to Daddy? Goyle stepped forward with a scowl, but Malfoy raised a hand to stop him. You'll learn soon enough, Potter, that some connections matter more than others. I offered my friendship on the train. That offer still stands. Harry remembered their encounter clearly, Malfoy insulting Ron, bragging about his family, and generally acting like Dudley with a British accent. Thanks, but I choose my own friends. Suit yourself, Malfoy shrugged, turning to unpack his expensive-looking trunk. But you'll find Slytherin works differently than whatever you've imagined. Blaise Zabini, who had been silently organizing his belongings, finally spoke. Perhaps we should all get some sleep before starting rivalries. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without adding house infighting. Theodore Nott nodded in agreement. Zabini's right. Save it for the Gryffindors. Harry climbed into bed and drew the curtains, grateful for the privacy. His mind whirled with the day's events, from Hagrid rescuing him from the Dursleys to the Sorting Hat's fateful decision. He'd been so certain about where he belonged, about what kind of wizard he wanted to be. Not Slytherin, he begged. Are you sure? The Hat had replied. You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. Harry rolled onto his side, staring at the shadowy hangings. Maybe the Hat had seen something he hadn't. Either way, he was here now. He'd survived 11 years with the Dursleys, he could handle whatever Slytherin house threw at him. With that determined thought, Harry closed his eyes and drifted into an uneasy sleep. Morning brought chaos as 5 boys attempted to navigate their morning routines in unfamiliar surroundings. Harry woke to find Draco meticulously styling his hair while Theodore quietly gathered his books and Goyle searched frantically for a missing shoe. Under your bed, Blaise pointed without looking up from the schedule he was reviewing. The Slytherin common room was already bustling when they emerged. Upper years lounged in the best chairs while younger students huddled around notice boards and compared timetables. Potter, called Gemma Farley, waving him over. Professor Snape asked me to give you this. She handed him a sealed envelope. Harry opened it to find a note in cramped, precise handwriting, my office, 3 p.m. today. Do not be late. What did you do already? Draco asked, reading over Harry's shoulder. Nothing, Harry replied, pocketing the note. Maybe it's standard for new students. Blaise raised an eyebrow. None of the rest of us got summoned. Maybe it's about being the boy who lived, Theodore suggested quietly. Let's get breakfast, Harry said, uncomfortable with the attention. I'm starving. Navigating to the Great Hall proved challenging. The castle seemed determined to confuse them with moving staircases, vanishing steps, and corridors that somehow circled back on themselves despite appearing straight. They finally arrived, joining the Slytherin table where prefects were distributing official schedules. Harry felt eyes following him from every direction. Students from other houses craned their necks to stare at the famous Harry Potter who had shockingly landed in Slytherin. At the Gryffindor table, Ron Weasley caught his eye and gave an awkward half-wave before his brothers pulled his attention away. We've got Transfiguration first with the Ravenclaws, Blaise noted, examining his schedule. Then double potions with Gryffindor, Theodore added. That should be interesting. Snape always favors us, Draco smirked, buttering his toast. Father says he's the only professor who properly appreciates Slytherin talents. Is that why he called me to his office? Harry wondered aloud. Maybe he wants to warn you not to embarrass the house, suggested Pansy Parkinson, joining their conversation uninvited. You weren't exactly raised to understand our ways. My ways are just fine, Harry replied coldly. Mail delivery interrupted the tension as hundreds of owls streamed into the Great Hall. Harry watched in amazement as parcels and letters dropped to students throughout the room. A regal eagle owl landed in front of Malfoy, delivering a package of sweets and a letter from home. Nothing for you, Potter? Draco asked with false concern. Oh wait, I forgot, finish that sentence, Malfoy. I dare you, Harry challenged quietly. To his surprise, Draco actually hesitated, reassessing Harry with a calculating look. Whatever he saw made him change tactics. Just making conversation, Potter. No need to be so sensitive. Professor McGonagall proved to be exactly as strict as she appeared. After transforming her desk into a pig and back, prompting excited whispers throughout the classroom, she set them to turning matches into needles after taking complicated notes. By the end of class, only Theodore and a Ravenclaw girl had made any significant progress. Harry's match had turned silvery but remained stubbornly wooden otherwise. A reasonable first attempt, Mr. Potter, McGonagall said during her inspection. Her eyes studied him with particular interest. With practice, I'm sure you'll improve. Their next class brought them to the dungeons for potions with the Gryffindors. Harry entered the classroom to find Ron Weasley saving him a seat, but Nott and Zabini immediately flanked him, guiding him to a Slytherin table near the front. House unity, remember? Blaise murmured. Harry glanced apologetically toward Ron, whose face fell before a freckled Gryffindor boy claimed the saved seat. Professor Snape began the class with roll call, pausing at Harry's name. Ah, yes, he said softly, Harry Potter. Our new celebrity. Malfoy and his friends sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling names and looked up at the class, his black eyes as cold and empty as a midnight tunnel. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making, he began. His voice was barely above a whisper, but they caught every word. There will be little foolish wand waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, and snaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stopper death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach. Silence followed this speech. Harry exchanged glances with Theodore, who gave him a tiny shrug. Potter, said Snape suddenly. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry froze. Powdered what to an infusion of what? He glanced at Theodore, who looked as stumped as he was. A bushy-haired Gryffindor girl had her hand in the air, stretching it as high as possible. "I don't know, sir," Harry replied. Snape's lips curled into a sneer. "Fame clearly isn't everything. Let's try again. Potter, where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" The same Gryffindor girl stretched her hand higher. Harry thought frantically. He'd skimmed his books, but nothing had stuck about bezoars. "I don't know, sir." "Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming, Potter." Snape continued, ignoring the girl's raised hand. "What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "I don't know, sir," Harry said quietly, adding, "but I think Hermione does." "Perhaps you should ask her." Several Gryffindors laughed, but the Slytherins looked shocked at his response. Snape was definitely not amused. "Sit down," he snapped at the Gryffindor girl. "For your information, Potter, asphodel and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the Draught of Living Death. A bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat and it will save you from most poisons. As for monkshood and wolfsbane, they are the same plant, also known as aconite." "Well, why aren't you all copying that down?" There was a sudden rummaging for quills and parchment. Over the noise, Snape added, "And 5 points from Slytherin for your cheek, Potter. I do not tolerate disrespect, even from my own house." The Slytherins around Harry shot him disbelieving looks. Apparently, losing points for their house was a serious offense. "And 5 points to Slytherin for Mr. Knott's correctly prepared ingredients," Snape continued, examining Theodore's neatly arranged workstation. Things didn't improve during the practical portion of the lesson. Snape swept around the room in his long black cloak, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, whom he seemed to favor. He was just telling everyone to look at the perfect way Malfoy had stewed his horned slugs when clouds of acid green smoke and a loud hissing filled the dungeon. A Gryffindor boy had somehow melted his partner's cauldron, and their potion was seeping across the stone floor, burning holes in people's shoes. Within seconds, the entire class was standing on their stools while the unfortunate Gryffindor, drenched in the potion, moaned in pain as angry red boils sprang up all over his arms and legs. "Idiot boy," snarled Snape, clearing the spilled potion away with one wave of his wand. "I suppose you added the porcupine quills before taking the cauldron off the fire?" The boy whimpered as boils started to pop up all over his nose. "Take him up to the hospital wing," Snape spat at the boy's partner, then rounded on the Gryffindors nearest the melted cauldron. "You, Thomas, why didn't you tell him not to add the quills? Thought he'd make you look good if he got it wrong, did you?" "That's another point from Gryffindor." This was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Theodore kicked him under the table. "Don't," he whispered. "Snape can make things much worse." As they climbed the steps out of the dungeon an hour later, Harry's mind raced. He'd lost points for Slytherin on his very first day, antagonized his head of house, and still had to face a private meeting with Snape that afternoon. "Cheer up," said Theodore, correctly reading Harry's expression. "Snape's always like that. At least he took points from Gryffindor too." "But he was completely unfair," Harry protested. "That Neville boy didn't do it on purpose." Blaise adjusted his bag on his shoulder. "Fairness isn't exactly a Slytherin priority, Potter. Effectiveness is. Snape effectively taught everyone to be careful with those quills. By humiliating someone. That's effective teaching. You'll never forget about those quills now, will you?" Draco smirked, pushing past them. "See you at lunch, Potter. Try not to lose us any more points before then." At 3 o'clock, Harry found himself standing outside Professor Snape's office door, gathering his courage before knocking. "Enter," came Snape's voice from within. The office matched its owner, dark, meticulously organized, and somewhat intimidating. Shelves lined with hundreds of glass jars containing floating, pickled animals and plants surrounded a large desk where Snape sat reviewing parchments. He didn't look up when Harry entered. "Sit down, Potter." Harry took the hard wooden chair opposite the desk and waited. "Do you know why I've called you here?" Snape finally asked, setting aside his quill and fixing Harry with an unreadable stare. No, sir. You are in a unique position, Potter. The first day hasn't ended, and already your housemates don't know what to make of you. The famous Harry Potter, vanquisher of the Dark Lord, sorted into Slytherin. Harry shifted uncomfortably. I didn't ask for any of that, sir. Perhaps not. But it is your reality nonetheless. Snape's fingers formed a steeple beneath his chin. Slytherin House has certain expectations of its members. Loyalty. Discretion. Cunning. Self-preservation. The Sorting Hat must have made a mistake, Harry began. The Sorting Hat does not make mistakes, Snape cut him off. It saw something in you, Potter. Something Slytherin. Harry remembered the Hat's words about greatness and felt a chill. Your little display in my classroom today, Snape continued, demonstrated neither cunning nor self-preservation. It showed a reckless disregard for house standing and a lack of respect for authority. Very Gryffindor tendencies. The Sorting Hat did consider Gryffindor, Harry admitted. Something flickered across Snape's face, surprise, perhaps, or confirmation of a suspicion. Listen carefully, Potter. Your name carries weight in our world, but that will only take you so far. In Slytherin, respect is earned through intelligence, ability, and knowing when to assert yourself. Not through petty defiance or showing off. I wasn't showing off, silence. Snape's voice remained soft but carried absolute authority. Your father was also fond of challenging teachers. He, too, believed rules existed for lesser mortals. The result was 7 years of arrogance and mediocrity. Harry felt heat rise in his face. My father was a Gryffindor through and through, Snape finished. You, however, are not. The Hat placed you in my house, which means you have potential beyond your father's legacy. Whether you fulfill that potential is entirely your decision. Harry stared at Snape, conflicting emotions battling within him. The professor clearly disliked him, or at least disliked his father. Yet there was something almost like a challenge in his words, a belief that Harry could be more than just James Potter's son or the boy who lived. What do you want from me, sir? Harry finally asked. I want you to think before you speak. I want you to consider consequences before acting. I want you to understand that being in Slytherin means navigating complexities that your Gryffindor friends will never comprehend. Snape's dark eyes bored into Harry's. Most of all, I want you to decide what kind of Slytherin you intend to be, Potter, because that choice will define your time at Hogwarts. I don't even know what that means, Harry admitted. Then observe. Learn. The Sorting placed you here for a reason. Snape picked up his quill, signaling the conversation was ending. You're dismissed, Potter. I expect significant improvement in your next potions class. Harry left the office with more questions than answers, Snape's words echoing in his mind. What kind of Slytherin did he intend to be? He didn't even know what his options were. As he rounded a corridor, he nearly collided with Ron Weasley. Harry! Ron exclaimed, looking both pleased and awkward. I've been looking for you. Thought maybe we could explore the castle a bit. Despite his confusion and the day's challenges, Harry felt his spirits lift. Yeah, I'd like that. They wandered through corridors and staircases, swapping impressions of their first day of classes. Ron's easy humor and straightforward manner were refreshing after the calculated interactions of the Slytherin common room. So, what's it like? Ron finally asked. You know, being in Slytherin. Harry considered the question carefully. Different than I expected. Everyone's watching everything I do. Even the way they talk feels like there's hidden meanings. Sounds exhausting, Ron sympathized. Gryffindor's brilliant though. Everyone's really nice, except maybe Percy when he's being all prefect. Why, Fred and George already set off a dung bomb in the common room. Sounds like fun, Harry said, a hint of envy in his voice. Yeah, well. Ron hesitated. Listen, just because you're in Slytherin doesn't mean we can't be friends, right? I mean, my dad always says not all Slytherins turn out bad. Just most of them. Harry laughed despite himself. Thanks for the vote of confidence. You know what I mean. Ron protested, grinning. You're different. Maybe, Harry mused, remembering Snape's challenge. Or maybe Slytherins are different than what everyone thinks. Their exploration eventually led them to the third floor, where they accidentally found themselves face to face with the forbidden corridor mentioned at the feast. A locked door and Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat, sent them running before Filch could catch them. That was close, Ron panted once they were safely away. What do you reckon they're keeping in there? No idea, Harry replied, but Dumbledore's warning makes more sense now. That cat is definitely deadly. As dinner approached, they reluctantly parted ways to join their respective house tables. Harry found a spot next to Theodore, who raised an eyebrow at his entrance. Fraternizing with Gryffindors already, Potter? He asked quietly. Just catching up with someone I met on the train, Harry replied, helping himself to shepherd's pie. Is there a rule against that? Theodore shrugged. Not officially. But it doesn't exactly help your standing here. Maybe I don't care about my standing, Harry retorted. Then you're going to have a very difficult 7 years, Blaise commented from across the table. Like it or not, Potter, hierarchy matters in Slytherin. Right now, everyone's trying to figure out where you fit. Harry looked around the table, noticing how the seating arrangements reflected clear groupings, older students with more authority at the center, first years at the periphery, except for those like Malfoy whose family connections earned them better positions. And where do I fit? He asked. That depends, Theodore replied. On what you can do. Who you ally with. How you carry yourself. It's politics, Potter, Blaise explained, seeing Harry's confusion. Every house has its own system. Ours just happens to be more explicit. That evening in the common room, Harry observed these dynamics in action. Students congregated in distinct groups around different areas. Older students claimed the best furniture near the fire, while younger years took what remained. When a seventh-year prefect entered, several second years immediately vacated a comfortable couch without being asked. Harry sat at a small table with Theodore, attempting to complete their transfiguration homework. Across the room, Draco held court with Crabbe, Goyle, and several other first years, his voice carrying as he described his family's influence at the ministry. Don't let Malfoy bother you, Theodore said, noticing Harry's attention drift. His family does have connections, but his constant reminders just show he's insecure about earning respect on his own merits. You seem to understand this place better than I do, Harry observed. Theodore's mouth quirked in a half-smile. My father's a Slytherin alumni. I was prepared. You weren't. So what's your advice? How do I navigate all this? Harry gestured vaguely at the common room politics. Theodore considered him for a moment. Figure out what you're good at and use it. Find allies who complement your strengths. And never show weakness, at least not publicly. That doesn't sound very friendly, Harry noted. It's not about friendship, Potter. It's about success. Theodore returned to his essay, adding, though the two aren't mutually exclusive. Even in Slytherin. The remainder of the week followed a similar pattern. Harry attended classes, where he discovered he was decidedly average at most magical subjects so far. He visited Hagrid on Friday afternoon, bringing Theodore along despite the groundskeeper's obvious discomfort with a Slytherin he didn't know. Yeah, shouldn't judge a whole house, Hagrid eventually admitted after Theodore demonstrated genuine interest in Fong, the massive boarhound. But history makes it hard sometimes. Their visit turned interesting when Harry noticed a Daily Prophet clipping about a Gringotts break-in occurring on his birthday, the very day he'd visited the Wizard Bank with Hagrid. The groundskeeper's evasiveness when questioned only increased Harry's curiosity, especially when Harry remembered the grubby little package Hagrid had removed from Vault 713. "That's suspicious," Theodore commented as they walked back to the castle. "Gringotts is supposed to be impenetrable. Hagrid collected something for Dumbledore that day," Harry explained. "Said it was Hogwarts business. Very secret." Theodore's eyes lit with interest. "And now someone's tried to steal from the bank. Connected?" "Has to be," Harry agreed. "And I bet whatever Hagrid took is what's behind that locked door on the 3rd floor. The Forbidden Corridor." Theodore looked impressed. "Good thinking, Potter. Guess I'm showing some Slytherin traits after all," Harry grinned. The weekend brought another development. A notice appeared on the Slytherin bulletin board announcing flying lessons would begin Thursday, with Gryffindor. "Perfect," said Draco, reading the notice. "I've been telling everyone how good I am on a broom. Now I can prove it, and show Weasley how it's done." "You've played Quidditch before?" Harry asked, genuinely curious despite his dislike of Malfoy's attitude. "Since I was 6, Draco replied. "Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house team." "Have you flown before, Potter?" "No," Harry admitted. "Well, some have natural talent," Draco shrugged with feigned sympathy. "But don't worry, first years never make the house team anyway." Throughout the week, conversations in both houses centered on flying. Draco told long, boastful stories about his near misses with helicopters, while Ron countered with tales of narrowly avoiding hang gliders on his brother's old broom. Even normally quiet Theodore shared a story about accidentally flying into his family's orchard and getting tangled in an apple tree. Harry felt increasingly nervous as Thursday approached. Flying seemed like another area where he'd be at a disadvantage, another subject where his Muggle upbringing left him unprepared. "Everyone starts somewhere," Blaise reassured him Wednesday evening. "Besides, I've watched Malfoy play wizard's chess. If his strategic thinking on a broom matches his gameplay, his stories are mostly hot air." Thursday afternoon arrived clear and breezy, perfect flying weather, according to Marcus Flint, the Slytherin Quidditch captain. The first-year Slytherins marched onto the training grounds as a unified group, presenting a contrast to the scattered Gryffindors who arrived individually or in pairs. 20 broomsticks lay on the ground, and their instructor, Madame Hooch, wasted no time with pleasantries. "Well, what are you waiting for?" she barked. "Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up." Harry glanced down at his broom. It was old and some of the twigs stuck out at odd angles. "Stick out your right hand over your broom," called Madame Hooch at the front, "and say, 'Up.'" "Up," everyone shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand immediately, one of the few that did. Draco's broom responded quickly as well, and he shot Harry a surprised look. Ron's broom simply rolled over on the ground, while Hermione Granger's didn't move at all. Madame Hooch showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, walking up and down the rows correcting grips. Harry and Ron exchanged grins when she told Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. "Now, when I blow my whistle, you kick off from the ground, hard," said Madame Hooch. "Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, and then come straight back down by leaning forward slightly. On my whistle, 3, 2, but Neville Longbottom, nervous and jumpy, pushed off before the whistle touched Madame Hooch's lips. He rose straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle, 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw his scared white face look down at the ground falling away, saw him gasp, slip sideways off the broom and, wham, a thud and a nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick continued rising and started to drift lazily toward the Forbidden Forest. Madame Hooch bent over Neville, her face as white as his. "Broken wrist," Harry heard her mutter. "Come on, boy, it's all right, up you get." She turned to the rest of the class. "None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You leave those brooms where they are or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear." Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madame Hooch, who had her arm around him. No sooner were they out of earshot than Draco burst into laughter. Did you see his face, the great lump? The other Slytherins joined in, though Harry noticed Theodore remained silent and Blaise only offered a polite smile. Shut up, Malfoy, snapped Parvati Patil, a Gryffindor girl. Ooh, sticking up for Longbottom, said Pansy Parkinson. Never thought you'd like fat little crybabies, Parvati. Look, said Draco, darting forward and snatching something from the grass. It's that stupid thing Longbottom's Gran sent him. A small glass ball glittered in the sun as he held it up, a remembrall, which Harry had seen Neville receive at breakfast. Give that here, Malfoy, said Harry quietly, stepping forward. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Draco smiled nastily. I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about up a tree? Give it here. Harry yelled, but Malfoy had already leapt onto his broomstick and taken off. Hovering level with the topmost branches of an oak, he called, Come and get it, Potter. Harry grabbed his broom. Harry, no, shouted Hermione Granger. You heard what Madam Hooch said, you'll get us all into trouble. Potter, think, hissed Theodore. This isn't worth getting expelled over. Harry ignored them both. Blood pounded in his ears as he mounted the broom and kicked off from the ground. Air rushed through his hair, his robes whipped out behind him, and in a rush of fierce joy, he realized he'd found something he could do without being taught. This was easy, this was wonderful. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take it even higher and heard screams and gasps from the girls and an admiring whoop from Ron. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Draco looked stunned. Give it here, Harry called, or I'll knock you off that broom. Oh, yeah, said Malfoy, trying to sneer, but looking worried. Harry somehow knew what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly, shooting toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about-face and held the broom steady. A few Slytherins below were clapping, seemingly impressed despite house loyalty. No Crabbe and Goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy, Harry called. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. Catch it if you can, then, he shouted, and he threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Harry saw, as though in slow motion, the ball rise up in the air and then start to fall. He leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down. Next second he was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball. Wind whistled in his ears, mingled with screams from the watching students. He stretched out his hand. A foot from the ground he caught it, just in time to pull his broom straight, and he toppled gently onto the grass with the remembrall clutched safely in his fist. Potter. His heart sank faster than he'd just dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. Harry got to his feet, trembling. Never, in all my time at Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock, and her glasses flashed furiously. How dare you, might have broken your neck, it wasn't his fault, Professor, be quiet, Miss Patil, but Malfoy, that's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me, now. Harry caught sight of Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces as he left, walking numbly in Professor McGonagall's wake as she strode toward the castle. He was going to be expelled, he just knew it. He hadn't even lasted 2 weeks. To his surprise, McGonagall didn't lead him to any office for punishment. Instead, she stopped outside a classroom, poked her head inside, and asked, "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick, could I borrow wood for a moment?" Wood? Was that some kind of cane used for corporal punishment? But Wood turned out to be a burly fifth-year boy who came out of Flitwick's class looking confused. "Follow me, you two," said Professor McGonagall, and they marched on up the corridor, Wood looking curiously at Harry. "In here." Professor McGonagall pointed them into an empty classroom. "Potter, this is Oliver Wood." "Wood, I've found you a seeker." Wood's expression changed from puzzlement to delight. "Are you serious, Professor?" "Absolutely," said McGonagall crisply. "The boy's a natural. I've never seen anything like it. Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter? Harry nodded silently, not having a clue what was going on. He wasn't being expelled. He caught that thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive, Professor McGonagall told Wood. Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it. Wood now looked as though all his dreams had come true at once. Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter? He asked excitedly. Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team, Professor McGonagall explained. Harry stared at her. But, I'm in Slytherin, Professor. A flicker of disappointment crossed her face, as though she'd momentarily forgotten this crucial detail. Yes, well. I should still inform Professor Snape of your talent. It would be a waste not to put such natural ability to use. She looked almost pained by her own fairness. I'll speak with your head of house, she continued briskly. If he agrees, perhaps we can arrange for an exception to the first-year rule. Heaven knows Slytherin could use some fresh talent. 10 minutes later, Harry was still trying to process what had happened when he encountered Theodore and Blaise waiting in the entrance hall. You're not expelled, Theodore observed with relief. What happened? Harry explained about McGonagall's reaction and her intention to speak with Snape. Their eyes widened as the implications became clear. First years never make the house team, Blaise repeated Malfoy's earlier words with irony. This will upset certain hierarchies. Snape might not allow it, Theodore pointed out. Not if McGonagall suggested it. He will if it means beating Gryffindor, Harry countered, remembering the tension between the two professors. He was right. That evening, Marcus Flint approached Harry in the common room, looking like he couldn't decide whether to be impressed or suspicious. Professor Snape says you've got seeker potential, Potter, he said without preamble. I'm holding a private tryout for you tomorrow evening. Don't make me waste my time. Word spread quickly through Slytherin House. By dinner, Harry found himself the center of attention, some admiring, some skeptical, and some openly hostile. My father will hear about this, Draco fumed to anyone who would listen. First years aren't allowed. It's against the rules. Rules can be bent for exceptional talent, Blaise replied smoothly. Something you'd know if you had any. Draco's face flushed with anger, but a warning look from a prefect prevented the argument from escalating. Later that evening, Harry was cornered by the Weasley twins in a corridor. Well done, Harry, said one twin in a low voice. Wood told us, the other explained. We're on the Gryffindor team too, beaters. You must be good, Harry. Wood was practically skipping when he told us. Even if you are a snake now, added the first twin with a wink. We still haven't forgiven McGonagall for telling Snape, mind you, said the second. Recruiting for the enemy. But fair's fair. Anyone who can fly like that deserves to play, even in green. Just watch out for our bludgers during the match, they said together, grinning identically before disappearing down the corridor. Harry's tryout the next evening was nerve-wracking but ultimately successful. Flint put him through increasingly difficult challenges, from basic flying maneuvers to catching small objects thrown at unpredictable angles. By the end, even the skeptical captain was impressed. Not bad, Potter, Flint grudgingly admitted. Raw, but trainable. Practice is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. Don't be late. That weekend, a long, thin package arrived for Harry during breakfast, carried by 6 screech owls. They dropped it right in front of him, narrowly missing his bacon, and another owl delivered a note that Harry read first, do not open the parcel at the table. It contains your new Nimbus 2000, but I don't want everybody knowing you've got a broomstick or they'll all want one. Marcus Flint will meet you this evening on the Quidditch field at 7 o'clock for your first training session. Professor S. Snape. Harry passed the note to Theodore, who read it with raised eyebrows. A Nimbus 2000, he whispered. Snape must really want to win the cup this year. What's that, Potter? Draco demanded, snatching the package from Harry's hands. He felt it and threw it back, jealousy and spite warring on his face. That's a broomstick. You'll be in trouble this time. First years aren't allowed. It's not just any broomstick, said Blaise, who had figured out what was happening, it's a Nimbus 2000. What did you say you've got at home, Malfoy? A Comet 260. Comets look flashy, but they're not in the same league as the Nimbus. What would you know about it, Zabini? Draco snapped. You don't even own one. No, but I've flown my cousins, Blaise replied coolly. The difference is remarkable, really. Like comparing a thoroughbred to, well, whatever you're riding. Draco's face contorted with fury and embarrassment. Before he could retort, Professor Flitwick appeared behind him. Not arguing, I hope, boys, he squeaked. Potter's been sent a broomstick, Professor, said Draco quickly. Yes, that's right, said Professor Flitwick, beaming at Harry. Professor McGonagall told me about the special circumstances, Potter. And what model is it? A Nimbus 2000, sir, said Harry, fighting not to laugh at the look of horror on Draco's face. And it's really thanks to Draco here that I got it, he added, unable to resist. As they left the Great Hall, they encountered Ron and Hermione on the marble staircase. Did you really get a broomstick, Harry? Ron asked excitedly. McGonagall told us you might be playing for Slytherin. A Nimbus 2000, Harry confirmed. I still think it's against the rules, Hermione sniffed. First years aren't supposed to have brooms or play on house teams. It's an exception, Harry explained. McGonagall and Snape both approved it. Maybe you can show me sometime? Ron asked hopefully. I've never flown a Nimbus. Weasley, if you want to see a Nimbus up close, you'll have to save up for about 5 centuries, Draco sneered, appearing behind them with Crabbe and Goyle. Ron's face flushed red. At least he didn't have to buy his way onto the team, Hermione shot back. He got in on pure talent. No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood, Draco spat. The reaction was instant. Ron plunged his hand into his robes for his wand, but before he could draw it, Theodore grabbed Harry and pulled him back while Blaise stepped smoothly between the groups. We should go, Potter, Theodore muttered urgently. Now. But Malfoy just, Harry protested, though he wasn't entirely sure what had happened. Trust me, Theodore insisted. This won't end well for anyone. As they hurried away, Harry heard raised voices behind them, followed by a bang and a shout. When they reached a quiet corridor, he demanded, what was that about? What did Malfoy call Hermione? Theodore and Blaise exchanged looks. It's a slur, Blaise finally explained. The worst thing you can call someone with Muggle parents. It means, dirty blood, Theodore added quietly. It's disgusting, and even most Slytherins know better than to say it openly. That's horrible, Harry said, feeling sick. Why didn't you let me stand up for her? Because Weasley was already doing that, Blaise pointed out, and because you getting involved would have made things worse for you in Slytherin. So I should just let people like Malfoy say things like that? No, Theodore replied firmly. But choose your battles, Potter. There are smarter ways to fight than direct confrontation. Harry thought about this as they made their way to the Slytherin common room. Perhaps Theodore was right, maybe there were other ways to challenge the prejudice he kept encountering. Ways that a Slytherin might approach the problem. That night, before unwrapping his new broomstick, Harry made a decision. He might be in Slytherin, but that didn't mean he had to accept everything about the house's culture. Maybe this was what Snape meant about choosing what kind of Slytherin he would be. The challenges of being the boy who lived in the House of Snakes were far from over. Between Quidditch practice, classwork, and navigating house politics, Harry had plenty to keep him occupied. But as October approached, bringing with it the promise of Halloween, Harry found himself increasingly comfortable with his green and silver identity. Not because he'd embraced all of Slytherin's values, but because he was defining for himself what they meant. Being cunning didn't have to mean being cruel. Ambition didn't have to come at others' expense. And maybe, just maybe, a Slytherin could be exactly the right kind of hero for a world that wasn't as black and white as he'd first thought. When he took to the sky on his Nimbus 2000 for the first time during Quidditch practice, Harry felt something he hadn't expected, a sense of belonging. Not because Slytherin House had fully accepted him, but because he'd started to accept his place within it. On his broom, high above the castle, the house divisions seemed petty and small. Up here, he wasn't the boy who lived or the Slytherin outsider, he was just Harry Potter, and he could fly. As he dove and soared, practicing the moves Flint had taught him, Harry smiled to himself. The Sorting Hat had been right after all. Slytherin was helping him on the way to greatness, just not in the way anyone had expected. Chapter 2, The Chamber's Heir. Harry's summer had been absolute garbage. After the excitement of his first year at Hogwarts, making the Slytherin Quidditch team, helping stop Voldemort from stealing the Philosopher's Stone, even if most people didn't know about that part, and finally finding a place where he sort of belonged, returning to Privet Drive felt like being thrown into a freezing lake. The Dursleys were terrified of him, which had its advantages. Uncle Vernon had locked Harry's school things in the cupboard under the stairs, but one casual mention of practicing Transfiguration had him scrambling to return Harry's belongings. Still, they'd been even more determined than usual to pretend he didn't exist. No letters from his friends had arrived all summer. Not from Theodore or Blaise, who'd promised to write. Not even from Ron, who'd sworn he'd invite Harry to visit the Weasleys. Harry was starting to wonder if he'd imagined having friends at all. On the particularly horrible evening of Uncle Vernon's important dinner party with the Masons, everything went spectacularly wrong. A house elf named Dobby appeared in Harry's bedroom, begging him not to return to Hogwarts because of some mysterious danger. When Harry refused, Dobby levitated Aunt Petunia's pudding and dropped it on Mrs. Mason's head. The result, a warning letter from the Ministry of Magic, delivered by Owl in front of the horrified dinner guests, bars on Harry's window, and a cat flap installed in his bedroom door for meager food deliveries. 3 miserable days later, Harry woke at midnight to the sound of a car engine. Outside his barred window hovered an old turquoise Ford Anglia, with Ron, Fred, and George Weasley inside. "All right, Harry?" asked George from the front passenger seat. "What's been going on?" said Ron. "Why haven't you answered my letters? I've asked you to stay about 12 times, and then Dad came home and said you got an official warning for using magic in front of Muggles." "It wasn't me," said Harry, "and how did your dad know?" "He works for the ministry," said Ron. "You know we're not supposed to do spells outside school, bit rich coming from you," said Harry, pointing at the flying car. "Oh, this doesn't count," said Ron. "We're just borrowing this. It's Dad's, we didn't enchant it. But doing magic in front of those Muggles you live with, I told you, I didn't, but it'll take too long to explain now. Look, can you tell them at Hogwarts that the Dursleys have locked me up and won't let me come back? I can't exactly do magic to escape." "Stop talking," said Fred, grinning. "We've come to take you home with us." "But you can't magic me out either." "We don't need to," said Ron, dangling a rope in front of Harry's face. "Ever heard of good old-fashioned breaking and entering?" 15 chaotic minutes later, involving Fred and George's impressive lock-picking skills, a frantic scramble to collect Harry's belongings, and Uncle Vernon crashing into the room just as they escaped, Harry found himself soaring above Privet Drive in the Weasleys' flying car, laughing with more genuine joy than he'd felt all summer. "So what's the story, Harry?" asked Ron impatiently. "What's been happening?" Harry told them about Dobby, the warning about danger at Hogwarts, and the blocked letters. The Weasleys listened with increasing outrage. "Very fishy," said Fred finally. "Definitely dodgy," agreed George. "So a house elf shows up to warn you not to go back to Hogwarts, and then tries to get you expelled before you even get there. Someone's playing a nasty trick." "But who?" asked Harry. "Well, think about it," said Ron. "Who wants to stop you from coming back to Hogwarts and would think it's funny to get you expelled?" "Draco Malfoy," Harry suggested immediately. "He hates me." "Malfoy?" said George, turning around. "Not Lucius Malfoy's son?" Must be, it's not a common name, is it? Said Harry. Why? I've heard Dad talking about him, said George. He was a big supporter of you-know-who. And when you-know-who disappeared, said Fred, Lucius Malfoy came back saying he'd never meant any of it. Dad reckons he was right in you-know-who's inner circle. Harry had heard these rumors before in Slytherin, where Draco's father was generally spoken about with cautious respect. The pieces suddenly fit together. That would explain why Dobby knew about the chamber. Harry muttered. The what? The three Weasleys asked simultaneously. Oh, Dobby mentioned something called the Chamber of Secrets. Said it had been opened before and terrible things happened. Fred and George exchanged serious looks. That's a Hogwarts legend, Fred said quietly. Dad's mentioned it once or twice. What is it? Harry pressed. Don't know the details, George admitted. But it's supposed to be some secret chamber Salazar Slytherin built. With a monster inside that only his true heir can control. Harry felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm summer night. And Dobby thinks it's going to be opened again. This year? Sounds like it, Ron said grimly. But how would Malfoy know about it? His father was a school governor, wasn't he? George pointed out. Might have inside information. The rest of the journey passed pleasantly as they speculated about the mysterious chamber and Harry's situation in Slytherin. The Weasleys were particularly interested in what it was like being in enemy territory, as Fred called it. Not all Slytherins are horrible, Harry explained. Theodore Nott and Blaise Zabini are decent. They've helped me navigate the politics. Politics? Ron made a face. Sounds exhausting. It is, Harry agreed. Everything's about status and connections. But I've figured some of it out. Winning the Quidditch Cup last year definitely helped. Don't remind us, groaned Fred. That last match was painful. Hey, I caught the snitch fair and square, Harry grinned. Yeah, rub it in, George laughed, reaching back to punch Harry's arm lightly. As dawn approached, they descended toward a tumble-down house built around a pigpen, with several stories stacked haphazardly on top of each other. It looked like magic was the only thing keeping it standing. Welcome to the Burrow, said Ron proudly. It was the most wonderful house Harry had ever seen. The month at the Weasleys was everything Harry's time with the Dursleys wasn't, warm, chaotic, and full of magic. Mrs. Weasley fussed over how thin he was and kept piling food onto his plate. Mr. Weasley bombarded him with questions about Muggle life. Ron's little sister Jinny kept dropping things whenever Harry came into the room. The only tension came when Percy, Ron's prefect older brother, discovered Harry's house affiliation. A Slytherin, he'd said loudly at dinner. Ronald, you never mentioned that. What's it matter? Ron asked, mouth full of potato. Harry's Harry. It matters because, Percy began pompously. It matters because nothing, Mrs. Weasley interrupted firmly. Harry is Ron's friend and our guest. That's all any of us need to concern ourselves with. Percy subsided, though he remained stiff and formal around Harry afterward. On their shopping trip to Diagon Alley, they encountered Hermione Granger, whose parents watched nervously as she exchanged enthusiastic greetings with Harry and Ron. I was so worried when you didn't answer my letters, she told Harry. But Ron explained about the house elf. It's very strange, they're supposed to be bound to wizard families. Their shopping expedition was proceeding smoothly until they encountered the Malfoys in Flourish and Blots. Lucius Malfoy and Arthur Weasley ended up in a physical brawl after Malfoy made sneering comments about the Weasleys' finances. Harry noticed something odd during the chaos. Mr. Malfoy slipped a small black book into Ginny Weasley's second-hand cauldron. He tried to point it out to Ron, but Hagrid was already dragging Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy apart, and the moment was lost. The encounter left Harry uneasy for reasons he couldn't quite explain. Why would Lucius Malfoy secretly give something to Ginny Weasley? And was it connected to Dobby's warning? Where have you been, demanded a voice as Harry settled into a compartment on the Hogwarts Express. Theodore Nott stood in the doorway, arms crossed but with a hint of relief in his usually guarded expression. "Long story," Harry replied, moving his trunk to make room. "Why didn't you answer my letters?" "What letters?" Theodore frowned, sitting opposite Harry. "I sent you 3 and never heard back." "That bloody house elf," Harry muttered, explaining the situation. Blaise joined them shortly, immaculately dressed as always and carrying a leather-bound book. "Potter lives," he observed dryly. "We were beginning to wonder." Harry recounted his summer adventures, including the Dobby incident and his rescue by the Weasleys. His friends listened attentively, Theodore's brow furrowing deeper with each new detail. "The Chamber of Secrets," Theodore said thoughtfully when Harry finished. "My father mentioned it once. Said it was Slytherin's greatest legacy." "What's inside it?" Harry asked. Theodore shrugged. "No one knows for sure. A weapon or creature only Slytherin's heir can control." "And it's been opened before?" Blaise asked, setting aside his book. "Supposedly 50 years ago," Theodore replied. "My father was vague on details, but students were attacked. Someone even died." The compartment door slid open again, revealing Ron and Hermione. There was an awkward pause. Slytherins and Gryffindors rarely mixed voluntarily. Everywhere else is full," Ron said lamely. "What he means," Hermione clarified, "is that we were looking for you, Harry." Theodore and Blaise exchanged glances. "Your fan club has arrived, Potter," Blaise commented with a small smirk, but he shifted to make room. The mixed house group settled into an uneasy coexistence. After initial stiffness, conversation gradually flowed more naturally as they discussed summer activities and the upcoming term. Theodore remained reserved but polite, while Blaise displayed unexpected charm, drawing Hermione into a discussion about Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2. "Theo was just telling us about the Chamber of Secrets," Harry said, steering the conversation toward his concerns. "The what?" Hermione leaned forward, instantly curious. As Theodore repeated what little he knew, their compartment door slid open yet again. This time, Draco Malfoy appeared, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Well, Draco drawled. "What do we have here? A blood traitor and a mudblood in our compartment?" Ron launched to his feet, wand out. "Say that again, Malfoy." "Ron, don't." Hermione grabbed his arm. "Malfoy," Harry cut in coolly, channeling the Slytherin approach to confrontation he'd learned last year, "did your father send you to check on me, or are you just bored?" Draco's pale cheeks flushed pink. "What's that supposed to mean, Potter?" "Just curious if this visit has a purpose beyond the usual insults," Harry replied with deliberate casualness. "Because we were having an interesting conversation before you interrupted." Theodore coughed slightly. "Slytherin Code 4, well played." Even Blaise looked impressed. Draco's eyes narrowed. "Watch yourself this year, Potter. Things are changing at Hogwarts. By spring, there won't be any mud, anything from the trolley, dears." The smiling witch with the food cart appeared behind Malfoy, cutting him off. "We'll take the lot," Harry said quickly, standing up. Malfoy was just leaving. With the arrival of food and the departure of Malfoy, the mood lightened considerably. As they shared chocolate frogs and Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, Harry felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Here he was, bridging the gap between Slytherin and Gryffindor. Maybe this was the kind of Slytherin he was meant to be. The journey continued pleasantly until they neared Hogwarts. As they changed into their school robes, green trimmed for Harry, Theodore, and Blaise, red for Ron and Hermione, Harry felt the familiar twinge of division. At school, these house colors defined them far more than they should. "We should do this again," Harry suggested as the train slowed. "Maybe study together in the library sometimes." Ron looked dubious, but Hermione nodded enthusiastically. "That's a brilliant idea, Harry. Inter-house cooperation is exactly what Hogwarts needs. Slytherin studying with Gryffindors. Theodore raised an eyebrow. That'll cause talk. Let it, Harry said firmly. I'm tired of house divisions dictating everything. As they disembarked at Hogsmeade Station, Blaise muttered to Harry, "Bold stance, Potter. Sure you weren't meant for Gryffindor after all?" The hat considered it, Harry admitted quietly. But it saw something Slytherin in me too. Clearly, Blaise replied with a slight smile. Not many second years would challenge house tradition so directly. That takes ambition. They parted ways as Hermione and Ron headed for one carriage while Harry and his Slytherin friends took another. The brief separation felt symbolic somehow. They could cross boundaries, but they still belonged to different worlds. The welcoming feast was as magnificent as Harry remembered. The Slytherin table greeted him with more warmth than last year. Winning the Quidditch Cup had significantly improved his standing. Even Marcus Flint, the burly team captain, nodded acknowledgement as Harry sat down. "Potter," Flint called down the table, "training starts next week. Don't get soft over the summer, did you?" "Flew every chance I got," Harry replied, which was mostly true if you counted the flying car. The sorting ceremony proceeded with the usual mixture of nervousness from first years and impatience from returning students. Harry noticed Jinny Weasley trembling as she approached the stool. The hat took nearly a minute before placing her in Gryffindor, where her brothers welcomed her with enthusiastic applause. Dumbledore's start-of-term announcements included the introduction of their new defense against the dark arts teacher, Gilderoy Lockhart, resplendent in robes of forget-me-not blue. Several Slytherin upper years made gagging motions, while most of the female population, and a few males, sighed appreciatively. "He's completely incompetent," whispered a fourth-year girl nearby. "My aunt works at the ministry. Says most of his stories are stolen from other wizards who mysteriously lost their memories." Harry glanced at the high table, where Lockhart was beaming and waving as though at an adoring crowd. Professor Snape, seated nearby, looked like he was contemplating the precise potion ingredients needed to dissolve the new professor. "Should be an interesting year," Theodore commented, following Harry's gaze. If only he knew how right he was. Classes began with their usual mixture of fascination and frustration. Professor Sprout introduced them to mandrakes, screaming plant babies whose cries could kill. Professor Flitwick had them revising levitation charms, which Hermione mastered immediately, again. Professor Binns droned on about goblin rebellions while most students dozed off. Potions remained challenging, though Snape seemed marginally less hostile toward Harry this year. Perhaps winning the Quidditch Cup had earned Harry a small measure of respect from his head of house. Defense against the dark arts, however, was an unmitigated disaster. Lockhart released a cage of Cornish pixies into the classroom and promptly lost control of the situation, fleeing to his office and leaving the students to deal with the chaos. Harry, Theodore, and Blaise ended up freezing several pixies with well-aimed immobility charms while Hermione handled the rest. "Did you see him run?" Blaise laughed as they left the classroom. "Some defense expert." "Father says Dumbledore's scraping the bottom of the barrel," Draco drawled, catching up to them in the corridor. "No decent wizard wants the defense position, it's cursed." For once, Harry found himself reluctantly agreeing with Malfoy. The first real sign of trouble came early on a Saturday morning. Harry had risen before dawn for Quidditch practice, only to discover the Gryffindor team had already booked the pitch. "I've got a note from Professor Snape," Flint was saying, waving a piece of parchment at Oliver Wood. "We need to train our new seeker." "You've got a new seeker?" Wood demanded. "Who?" From behind the wall of larger Slytherin players emerged Draco Malfoy, smirking triumphantly. "Aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son?" asked Fred Weasley, looking at Draco with dislike. "Funny you should mention Draco's father," said Flint as the whole Slytherin team smiled still more broadly. "Let me show you the generous gift he's made to the Slytherin team." All 7 of them held out their broomsticks. 7 highly polished, brand-new handles and 7 sets of fine gold lettering spelling the words Nimbus 2001 gleamed in the early morning sun. Very latest model. Only came out last month, said Flint carelessly, flicking a speck of dust from the end of his own. I believe it outstrips the old 2000 series by a considerable amount. As for the old clean sweeps, he smiled nastily at Fred and George, who were both clutching clean sweep 5s, sweeps the board with them. Harry stared in disbelief. Malfoy? Our new seeker. What about me? Flint had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. You're still on the team, Potter. We're moving you to Chaser. With your flying skills and these new brooms, we'll be unstoppable. You can't do that. Harry protested. I'm a seeker. I can and I did, Flint replied firmly. Professor Snape approved the change. Ron and Hermione had arrived to watch the confrontation. At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in, Hermione said sharply. They got in on pure talent. Draco's smug look flickered. No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood, he spat. Instant chaos erupted. Ron plunged his hand into his robes, pulled out his wand, and yelled, "You'll pay for that one, Malfoy." A loud bang echoed around the stadium and a jet of green light shot out of the wrong end of Ron's wand, hitting him in the stomach and sending him reeling backward onto the grass. Ron! Ron! Are you all right? Squealed Hermione. Ron opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he gave an almighty belch and several slugs dribbled out of his mouth onto his lap. The Slytherin team roared with laughter. Flint was doubled up, hanging onto his new broomstick for support. Malfoy was on all fours, banging the ground with his fist. Only Harry remained apart, torn between team loyalty and friendship. We'd better get him to Hagrid's, it's nearest, said Harry to Hermione, who nodded bravely, and together they pulled Ron up by the arms. As they left the field, Harry looked back once to see his teammates still laughing, all except Theodore, who had arrived late and was watching the scene with a troubled expression. After delivering Ron to Hagrid's care, Harry reluctantly returned to the Quidditch pitch, where practice was well underway. Nice of you to join us, Potter, Flint called sarcastically. Since you've decided to grace us with your presence, let's see if you can handle a quaffle as well as you do a snitch. Harry mounted his broom, still fuming. As he kicked off, however, his anger transformed into determination. He'd show them, especially Malfoy, that position didn't matter. He was still the best flyer on the team. For the next 2 hours, Harry threw himself into training with fierce intensity. His natural flying talent translated well to the chaser position, and soon even Flint was nodding approval as Harry executed complex maneuvers and scored goal after goal. Not bad, Potter, Flint admitted grudgingly as they touched down at the end of practice. You might make a decent chaser after all. Harry merely nodded, still too angry to speak civilly. As the team dispersed toward the changing rooms, Theodore approached him. That was quite a display, he commented. Trying to prove something? Just playing Quidditch, Harry replied shortly. Right. Theodore fell into step beside him. For what it's worth, I think Flint made a mistake. You're a natural seeker. Tell that to Malfoy's father and his 7 Nimbus 2001s, Harry muttered bitterly. Theodore glanced around to ensure no one was listening. Don't let Malfoy get to you, he advised quietly. That's exactly what he wants. Besides, this might work out in your favor. How's that? Harry asked skeptically. Malfoy's mediocre at best. When Slytherin loses because he can't catch the snitch, guess who'll be back in position? Harry considered this, a small smile forming despite his frustration. That's very Slytherin thinking, Theo. Theodore shrugged. It's just strategy. Patience can be more effective than confrontation. That evening in the common room, Harry found himself the center of curious attention as word spread about his position change. Opinions were divided, some thought it was brilliant strategy to utilize his flying skills in a scoring position, while others questioned fixing something that wasn't broken. Potter, a cool voice interrupted his thoughts. Professor Snape stood nearby, his dark eyes unreadable as always. A word. They moved to a quieter corner of the common room. I understand there was an incident at practice this morning, Snape began without preamble. Sir? Harry asked cautiously. Mr. Weasley's unfortunate transfiguration into a slug dispenser, Snape clarified with the barest hint of amusement. Malfoy called Hermione a, Harry caught himself. He used a slur, sir. Ron was defending her. I see. Snape's expression revealed nothing. And your position change? You seem less than enthusiastic. Harry hesitated, weighing his response. Last year had taught him that Snape valued honesty, albeit delivered with respect. I prefer Seeker, Professor. It's where I excel. Indeed. Snape studied him for a moment. Yet you performed admirably as Chaser today, according to Flint. I can fly in any position, sir. Yes, Snape agreed softly. Your father was the same. Harry's head snapped up in surprise. Snape rarely mentioned his father, and never positively. He was a chaser, Snape continued, his voice neutral. Quite skilled, though I'm loath to admit it. Harry wasn't sure how to respond. Was Snape actually giving him advice, in his own twisted way? A good Slytherin adapts, Potter, Snape said finally. Remember that. With a swish of his black robes, he was gone. October arrived, spreading a damp chill over the grounds. Madame Pomfrey, the nurse, was kept busy by a sudden spate of colds among staff and students. Her pepper-up potion worked instantly, though it left the drinker smoking at the ears for several hours afterward. Harry's Quidditch performance as Chaser continued to improve, though he still resented watching Malfoy fumble with the snitch during practices. Theodore's prediction seemed increasingly likely, Malfoy's flying was competent but not exceptional, and he lacked the sharp seeker's instinct Harry possessed naturally. Meanwhile, Harry had successfully established a regular study group with Ron, Hermione, Theodore, and occasionally Blaise in the library. Their unusual mixed-house collaboration raised eyebrows, but Hermione's academic excellence made her too valuable a resource for even status-conscious Slytherins to ignore. I still don't understand why the switching spell won't work on liquids, Ron complained during one session, throwing down his quill in frustration. Because liquids lack defined boundaries, Theodore explained patiently. The spell needs precise parameters to execute the switch. Exactly right, Hermione beamed, looking impressed. The textbook explains it as, we get it, Granger, Blaise interrupted smoothly. Some of us actually read the assignments. Rather than looking offended, Hermione seemed pleased at the implied compliment. Harry noticed with amusement that she seemed to enjoy intellectual sparring with his Slytherin friends, particularly Blaise, whose drawling wit challenged her in ways Ron's and Harry's more straightforward approaches didn't. On Halloween morning, Harry awoke to the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the castle. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced in charms that he thought they were ready to start making objects fly, something they had all been dying to try since seeing him make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. The Halloween feast that evening featured flaming jack-o'-lanterns, clouds of fluttering bats, and golden plates that filled magically with delicious food. Harry was just helping himself to a baked potato when nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost, drifted by their table looking unusually gloomy. "What's got you down, Sir Nicholas?" Harry asked politely. He'd had several pleasant conversations with the ghost during his first year. Rejected again, the ghost sighed dramatically. 500 years of waiting, and still not good enough for the headless hunt. Apparently, being nearly headless doesn't count. That's rough, Harry sympathized, earning a small smile from the ghost before he floated away. Fraternizing with Gryffindor ghosts now, Potter? Draco sneered from further down the table. First Weasley and Granger, now dead Gryffindors. Your standards keep dropping. Harry ignored him, turning instead to discuss the upcoming Quidditch match against Gryffindor with Theodore and Blaise. As the feast ended and students began filing out of the Great Hall, Harry heard it, a voice, cold and murderous, that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Rip, tear, kill. He stumbled to a halt, clutching at the stone wall, listening with all his might, looking around, squinting up and down the dimly lit passageway. "Harry, what are you?" Theodore began. "Shoo! Listen!" Harry interrupted urgently. "Can you hear it? So hungry, for so long." "Hear what?" Blaise looked perplexed. "That voice," Harry said, still looking around frantically. "Kill, time to kill." The voice was growing fainter. Harry was sure it was moving away, and upward. A mixture of fear and excitement gripped him as he stared at the dark ceiling. How could only he hear it? "This way," he shouted, and he began to run up the stairs into the entrance hall. Theodore and Blaise exchanged confused glances before following. Harry sprinted up the marble staircase to the first floor, his friends clattering behind him. "Harry, what are we?" "Quidditch." Harry strained his ears. Distantly, from the floor above, and growing fainter still, he heard the voice. "I smell blood. I smell blood." His stomach lurched. "It's going to kill someone," he shouted, ignoring his friends' bewildered faces, and ran up the next flight of steps 3 at a time, trying to listen over his own pounding footsteps. Harry hurtled around the whole of the second floor, Theodore and Blaise panting behind him, not stopping until they turned a corner into the last, deserted passage. "Harry, what was that all about?" Blaise asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "We couldn't hear anything." But Theodore grabbed both their arms, pointing down the corridor. "Look!" Something was shining on the wall ahead. They approached slowly, squinting through the darkness. Foot-high words had been daubed on the wall between 2 windows, shimmering in the light cast by flaming torches. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." "What's that thing, hanging underneath?" Blaise whispered, his voice suddenly tense. As they edged nearer, Harry almost slipped on a large puddle of water on the floor. They inched toward the message, eyes fixed on a dark shadow beneath it. All 3 of them realized what it was at once, and leapt backward. Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat, was hanging by her tail from a torch bracket. She was stiff as a board, her eyes wide and staring. For a few seconds, they didn't move. Then Blaise said, "Let's get out of here." "Shouldn't we try to help?" Harry began. "Trust me," Theodore cut in urgently. "We don't want to be found here." But it was too late. A rumble, as though of distant thunder, told them that the feast had just ended. From either end of the corridor came the sound of hundreds of feet climbing the stairs, and loud, happy talk of well-fed people. The next moment, students were crashing into the passage from both ends. The chatter, the bustle, the noise died suddenly as the people in front spotted the hanging cat. Harry, Theodore, and Blaise stood alone, in the middle of the corridor, as silence fell among the mass of students pressing forward to see the grisly sight. Then someone shouted through the quiet. "Enemies of the air, beware. You'll be next, mudbloods." It was Draco Malfoy. He had pushed to the front of the crowd, his cold eyes alive, his usually bloodless face flushed, as he grinned at the sight of the hanging, immobile cat. "What's going on here? What's going on?" Attracted no doubt by Malfoy's shout, Argus Filch came shouldering his way through the crowd. Then he saw Mrs. Norris and fell back, clutching his face in horror. "My cat! My cat! What's happened to Mrs. Norris?" he shrieked. And his popping eyes fell on Harry. You've murdered my cat. You've killed her. I'll kill you. Argus." Dumbledore had arrived on the scene, followed by a number of other teachers. In seconds, he had swept past Harry, Theodore, and Blaise and detached Mrs. Norris from the torch bracket. "Come with me, Argus," he said to Filch. "You, too, Mr. Potter, Mr. Knott, Mr. Zabini." Lockhart stepped forward eagerly. My office is nearest, headmaster, just upstairs. Please feel free, thank you, Gilderoy, said Dumbledore. The silent crowd parted to let them pass. As they entered Lockhart's darkened office, Harry became acutely aware of the gravity of their situation. 3 Slytherin students found at the scene of what appeared to be a dark magic attack. This looked very bad indeed. Dumbledore lay Mrs. Norris on the polished surface of Lockhart's desk and began to examine her. The tip of his long, crooked nose was barely an inch from Mrs. Norris's fur. Harry, Theodore, and Blaise exchanged tense looks as Dumbledore prodded and poked. Professor McGonagall bent almost as close, and Snape loomed behind them, half in shadow, wearing a most peculiar expression, as though he was trying hard not to smile. It was definitely a curse that killed her, probably the transmogrifian torture. I've seen it used many times, so unlucky I wasn't there. I know the very counter-curse that would have saved her. Lockhart was hovering around them, making unhelpful comments as the silence stretched on. At last, Dumbledore straightened up. "She's not dead, Argus," he said softly. "Not dead," choked Filch, looking through his fingers at Mrs. Norris. "But why is she all stiff and frozen?" "She has been petrified," said Dumbledore. "But how, I cannot say." "Ask him," shrieked Filch, turning his blotched and tear-stained face to Harry. "It's him that's done it. You saw what he wrote on the wall." "No second year could have done this," said Dumbledore firmly. "It would take dark magic of the most advanced. He did it. Filch spat, his face purpling. "You saw what he wrote on the wall?" "He found, in my office, he knows I'm a, Filch's face worked horribly. "He knows I'm a squib," he finished. "I never touched Mrs. Norris," Harry said loudly, feeling Theodore and Blaise tense beside him. "And I don't even know what a squib is." "Rubbish," snarled Filch. "He saw my quickspell letter." "If I might speak, headmaster," said Snape from the shadows, and Harry's sense of foreboding increased. He was sure nothing Snape had to say was going to help him. "Potter and his friends may have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time," Snape said, a slight sneer curling his mouth as though he doubted it. "But we do have a set of suspicious circumstances here. Why were they in the upstairs corridor at all? Why not at the Halloween feast?" Harry, Theodore, and Blaise all launched into an explanation about leaving the feast early, but were cut off by Snape's cold voice. "Without supper? I didn't notice you leave the Great Hall early." His black eyes glittered in the candlelight. "What exactly prompted 3 students from my house to venture to that particular corridor?" Harry hesitated. Telling them about the disembodied voice would sound insane, especially since Theodore and Blaise hadn't heard it. To his surprise, Theodore spoke up smoothly. "We were on our way back to the common room, sir. That corridor is one of the routes down to the dungeons. We noticed the water on the floor and went to investigate." "A perfectly reasonable explanation," Professor McGonagall commented. "Indeed," said Snape, though his tone suggested he was far from convinced. "However, we still have no explanation for the message on the wall." "Oh, come now, Severus," McGonagall interrupted. "Surely you don't believe these boys could have, innocent until proven guilty, Severus," Dumbledore said firmly, his eyes twinkling slightly as he met Harry's gaze. Filch was furious. "My cat has been petrified," he shrieked, eyes popping. "I want to see some punishment." "We will be able to cure her, Argus," said Dumbledore patiently. "Professor Sprout recently managed to procure some mandrakes. As soon as they have reached their full size, I will have a potion made that will revive Mrs. Norris." "I'll make it," Lockhart butted in. "I must have done it 100 times. I could whip up a mandrake restorative draught in my sleep." "Excuse me," said Snape icily. "But I believe I am the potions master at this school." An awkward silence followed. "You may go," Dumbledore said to Harry, Theodore, and Blaise. They went, as quickly as they could without actually running. "That was close," Blaise muttered once they were safely away from Lockhart's office. "Quick thinking, Theo." "Thanks," Theodore replied grimly. But we're not out of the woods yet. Snape didn't believe us. It's the truth, Harry insisted. Well, mostly. We were heading back to the common room. After you started hearing voices no one else could hear, Blaise pointed out. That's not exactly normal, Potter, even by wizarding standards. I know what I heard, Harry said defensively. And it led us straight to the message in Mrs. Norris. Theodore frowned thoughtfully. A voice only you can hear, connected to the Chamber of Secrets. Harry, this is serious. You don't think I had anything to do with, of course not, Theodore interrupted firmly. But there's something else going on here. We need to figure out what. When they reached the common room, they found it buzzing with excited speculation about the attack. Students huddled in clusters, theories flying fast and furious. Some looked frightened, but others, particularly those from traditional pure-blood families, seemed almost gleeful. The heir of Slytherin, a sixth year, was saying reverently. After all these years. First a mangy cat, Montague grinned. Next, the mudbloods themselves. Harry felt sick listening to them. Catching Theodore's eye, he nodded toward their dormitory, and they slipped away from the increasingly disturbing conversations. They're actually happy about this, Harry said in disbelief once they were alone with Blaise in their dorm. Some are, Theodore acknowledged, sitting on his bed. The chamber is part of Slytherin legend. The idea that Salazar's heir has returned to purify the school appeals to certain ideologies. It's disgusting, Harry declared. Someone, or something, attacked Mrs. Norris, and they're celebrating. Blaise shrugged. It's just a cat, Potter. This time, Harry countered. But that message, enemies of the heir, beware, that's aimed at students. At muggleborns like Hermione. So what do you propose? Blaise asked, eyebrow raised. That we investigate? Play detective? Yes, actually, Harry said firmly. Theodore and Blaise exchanged looks. Could be dangerous, Theodore pointed out. And not exactly a popular position to take in Slytherin right now. I don't care, Harry replied. This is wrong. And that voice I heard. I need to understand what's happening. After a moment, Theodore nodded. All right, Potter. I'm in. Oh, why not? Blaise sighed dramatically. My mother always said curiosity would be my downfall. Might as well make it interesting. For the next few days, the school could talk of little else but the attack on Mrs. Norris. Filch kept it fresh in everyone's minds by pacing the spot where she had been attacked, as though he thought the attacker might return. Harry had seen him scrubbing the message on the wall with Mrs. Scour's all-purpose magical mess remover, but to no effect. The words still gleamed as brightly as ever on the stone. When Filch wasn't guarding the scene of the crime, he was stalking red-eyed through the corridors, lunging out at unsuspecting students and trying to put them in detention for things like breathing loudly and looking happy. Ginny Weasley seemed very disturbed by Mrs. Norris's fate. According to Ron, she was a great cat lover. But you hadn't really gotten to know Mrs. Norris, Ron told her bracingly. Honestly, we're much better off without her. This didn't seem to comfort Ginny, who looked increasingly pale and withdrawn. Harry, meanwhile, found himself the subject of renewed suspicion and whispers. His presence at the scene of the attack, combined with his Slytherin robes, led many students from other houses to draw their own conclusions. He'd caught several Hufflepuffs turning to walk in the opposite direction when they spotted him in a corridor, and even some Ravenclaws were giving him a wide berth. Only his established friendship with Ron and Hermione seemed to shield him from the worst accusations. After all, how could the heir of Slytherin be friends with a blood traitor and a muggleborn? Within Slytherin House, however, Harry's status had undergone a curious transformation. Students who had previously ignored him now regarded him with cautious respect. Some even approached him with subtle, probing questions about his ancestry and magical abilities. Potter, a fifth-year prefect, asked casually one evening in the common room, your mother was Muggle-born, wasn't she? But your father's family, they were purebloods, right? The Potters go back several generations, Theodore interjected before Harry could respond. They're in nature's nobility. The prefect nodded thoughtfully and wandered off, leaving Harry confused. What was that about? He asked Theodore. They're trying to figure out if you could be the heir, Theodore explained quietly. The timing of our presence at the scene, combined with your unusual history, has made some wonder. That's ridiculous, Harry protested. I'm half-blood at best. The Dark Lord himself was half-blood, Blaise pointed out, joining their conversation. Blood status isn't everything, despite what some might believe. I'm not the heir of Slytherin. Harry insisted. We know that, Theodore reassured him. But the speculation works in your favor for now. Better to have people wary of you than accusing you. Harry wasn't so sure. The investigation into the chamber began with library research. Hermione, predictably, took charge of this aspect, spending hours poring over ancient texts with Theodore, who proved equally dedicated to academic pursuit. Blaise contributed occasional insights but spent more time charming information from upper-year students with family connections to Slytherin's past. Ron, like Harry, found the research tedious but contributed enthusiastically to brainstorming sessions. I found references to the chamber in Hogwarts, a history, Hermione reported during one of their secret meetings in an unused classroom. But nothing about what's inside it or how to find it. My father mentioned once that the last time the chamber was opened was in 1943, Theodore added. A student died. Who? Harry asked, alarmed. He didn't say. Just that Hogwarts nearly closed over it. We need to figure out who the heir is now, Ron said. Any Slytherins acting suspicious lately, Harry? Harry shrugged. Half the house seems thrilled about the chamber, but that doesn't mean they opened it. Malfoy's been particularly smug, though. It's always Malfoy with you, Blaise commented dryly. Though I admit he has been dropping hints about knowing more than he's telling. We need to get him to talk somehow, Ron suggested. Trick him into confessing. That's when Hermione proposed a plan so audacious, so un-Hermione-like, that they all stared at her in shock, using Polyjuice potion to disguise themselves as Slytherins close to Malfoy and interrogate him directly. That's actually brilliant, Blaise admitted with newfound respect. Completely against about 50 school rules, but brilliant. The ingredients will be difficult to obtain, Theodore mused. Some are in the student cupboard, but others, bicorn horn, boomslang skin, those are in Snape's private stores. I can handle that, Harry said confidently. But we'll need somewhere private to brew it. The potion takes a month to make. I know just the place, Hermione smiled mysteriously. The following weekend brought the first Quidditch match of the season, Slytherin vs Gryffindor. Despite his resentment at being moved to Chaser, Harry found himself genuinely excited as he donned his green Quidditch robes. Nervous, Potter? Flint asked as the team gathered in the changing room. Ready, Harry replied simply. Flint nodded approvingly. Remember the plays we practiced? Those new brooms give us the edge, but Woods trained his team well. Especially their new seeker. Harry felt a twinge of jealousy at the mention of his former position. Gryffindor had recruited a small second-year named Colin Creevey as their seeker, an enthusiastic boy who seemed perpetually armed with a camera and an admiration for Harry that bordered on worship. Malfoy, Flint turned to Draco with a hard stare. Catch the snitch or die trying. I always do, Draco smirked, though Harry noticed a flash of nervousness in his pale eyes. As they marched onto the pitch, the crowd's reaction was telling, thunderous cheers from the Slytherin section, boos and hisses from Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, and polite applause from Ravenclaw. Harry spotted Ron and Hermione sitting awkwardly in the Slytherin stands, invited by Theodore as a gesture of interhouse friendship, though they were receiving plenty of suspicious glares. The match began with Slytherin immediately taking advantage of their superior brooms, scoring 3 goals in quick succession. Harry found himself falling into rhythm with the other chasers, his natural flying ability making up for his inexperience with the quaffle. When he scored his first goal, threading the ball through the left hoop past Wood's outstretched fingers, the Slytherin section erupted. "And that's Potter scoring for Slytherin," announced Lee Jordan, the Gryffindor commentator, with barely disguised disappointment. 10-0 to Slytherin. The game intensified as Gryffindor adjusted to Slytherin's speed advantage. Fred and George Weasley targeted the Slytherin chasers mercilessly with bludgers, forcing Harry into several spectacular evasive maneuvers. One bludger in particular seemed almost fixated on Harry, returning again and again despite the Slytherin beater's efforts to divert it. "What's with that bludger?" Theodore called from the stands as Harry narrowly avoided another attack. "Someone's tampered with it," Blaise shouted back. Through the chaos, Harry noticed Draco hovering high above the pitch, watching the game with apparent disinterest rather than searching for the snitch. The Gryffindor seeker, meanwhile, was zigzagging methodically, eyes peeled for the golden flash. The rogue bludger made another pass at Harry just as he was about to score again. He barrel-rolled to avoid it, somehow maintaining control of the quaffle, but the momentum carried him far off course. As he righted himself, he spotted something the others had missed, the golden snitch, fluttering near the Gryffindor goalposts. "Malfoy," he shouted, pointing frantically. "The snitch!" But Draco was too far away, and Creevy had already noticed Harry's gesture. The Gryffindor seeker immediately dove toward the snitch. In a split-second decision, Harry abandoned his position, dropped the quaffle, and rocketed toward the snitch himself. He wasn't the seeker anymore, but his instincts took over. The rogue bludger followed, whistling menacingly behind him. "Potter, what are you doing?" he heard Flint bellow, but he was already fully committed. Harry pushed his nimbus to its limit, gaining on Creevy, who had a significant head start. The snitch darted sideways, then down, leading them both on a twisting chase through the pitch. Harry could feel the bludger closing in as he reached out, fingers stretching. A sickening crack accompanied a burst of pain as the bludger smashed into his arm. Somehow, Harry maintained consciousness and position, his good arm still straining forward. With one final, desperate lunge, his fingers closed around the tiny golden ball. "I've got the snitch," he shouted, holding it high. The stadium erupted in confusion. Lee Jordan's voice boomed, "Potter's caught the snitch, but he's not the seeker. What happens now?" Madame Hooch's whistle blew as she flew toward the scene. The teams landed, Harry cradling his clearly broken arm while still clutching the snitch. According to the rules, Hooch announced after a brief consultation of her handbook, a chaser may legally catch the snitch, but only the designated seeker's capture ends the game and awards the points. "That's Potter's catch," Flint argued. "Our team caught the snitch fair and square." "Rules are rules, Mr. Flint," Hooch replied firmly. "The game continues." "Like hell it does," Flint growled, turning to his team. "Malfoy, you're benched. Potter, you're seeker for the remainder of this match. You can't switch positions mid-game." Wood protested. "Actually, he can," Hooch interjected, checking her rulebook again. "Team captains may reassign positions during official timeouts, which this is." Wood looked furious but could do nothing as Malfoy slouched off the pitch, his face burning with humiliation, while Harry was quickly treated by Madame Pomfrey. "This arm needs proper attention," she insisted. Later, Harry said through gritted teeth, "I need to finish this." With his arm hastily bandaged and numbed, Harry returned to the sky as Slytherin seeker. The rogue bludger had been captured and was being examined by the teachers. The remaining minutes of the game were anticlimactic. Harry's official capture of the snitch came barely 5 minutes after play resumed, securing a 200-30 victory for Slytherin. The celebration in the Slytherin common room that evening was raucous. Even Professor Snape made a brief appearance, his expression as close to pleased as Harry had ever seen it. While the party raged around him, Harry sat in a corner with Theodore and Blaise, his arm properly mended but still slightly tender. "Impressive flying today, Potter," Blaise acknowledged, raising his butterbeer in a toast. That bludger wasn't acting naturally, Theodore said quietly. Someone enchanted it to target you specifically. But who? Harry wondered. And why? Before they could speculate further, Draco Malfoy approached their corner, his face a mask of contempt barely concealing deeper emotion. Enjoying your moment, Potter, he spat. Always have to be the hero, don't you? Couldn't just play your position like everyone else. I spotted the snitch and reacted, Harry replied evenly. Maybe if you've been paying attention instead of hovering around doing nothing, my father will hear about this, Draco hissed. This was supposed to be my position. Your father's brooms got you on the team, Harry retorted, patience wearing thin. Your flying is what lost you your spot. Draco's hand moved toward his wand, but Flint appeared beside him, gripping his shoulder firmly. Problem, Malfoy? The captain asked coldly. No, Draco muttered, shrugging off Flint's hand and stalking away. You're officially Seeker again, Potter, Flint informed him. That catch today, that's what we need. Malfoy can warm the bench or play chaser if someone's injured. As Flint walked away, Theodore leaned forward. You've made an enemy there, he observed. More than before, I mean. Malfoy's always hated me, Harry shrugged. This is different, Blaise said, watching Draco disappear into the dormitory. You've humiliated him in front of the whole school, taken his position, and undermined his father's influence. That's not something a Malfoy forgives easily. He'll be plotting something, Theodore agreed. Be careful. The next morning at breakfast, Ron and Hermione joined Harry at the Slytherin table, an unprecedented move that caused a ripple of whispers throughout the Great Hall. Brilliant flying yesterday, Ron grinned, ignoring the glares from nearby Slytherins. Though I feel like a traitor saying so. That bludger was definitely tampered with, Hermione said worriedly. Professor Flitwick and Madame Hooch were examining it after the match. Any idea who could have done it? Harry asked. Well, it obviously wasn't someone who wanted Slytherin to win, Ron pointed out. Though I still can't believe you're back as Seeker. No offense, but I was hoping we'd have a chance at the cup this year. Everything set for our project? Harry asked quietly, changing the subject. Hermione nodded. I found the perfect place. And I've worked out how to get the restricted ingredients. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the male owls. A handsome tawny owl landed in front of Theodore, carrying a letter sealed with black wax. His expression darkened as he read it. Everything all right, Theo? Harry asked. Fine, Theodore replied tersely, tucking the letter away. Family business. Harry didn't press the issue, but he noticed Theodore remained distracted and tense for the remainder of breakfast. Later that day, during herbology, Harry finally had a chance to speak privately with Theodore as they pruned Abyssinian shrivelfigs together. That letter this morning, Harry began cautiously. Bad news? Theodore hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. My father. He's interested in the chamber situation. Wants to know if there's any substance to the rumors. What kind of rumors? That Slytherin's heir has returned. That the chamber will be used to purge the school of. Theodore paused, glancing toward where Hermione was working with Neville Longbottom. Those considered unworthy. And what did you tell him? Harry asked carefully. Nothing yet. Theodore's expression was troubled. My father has certain expectations about where my loyalties should lie. Harry understood immediately. Theodore's father was likely a pure-blood supremacist, possibly even a former supporter of Voldemort like Lucius Malfoy. You don't have to answer him, Harry suggested. Or you could be vague. It's not that simple with my father, Theodore replied grimly. But don't worry about it. I'll handle it. That evening, their investigation took a dramatic turn when Colin Creevey was found petrified, his camera still clutched in his rigid hands. The news spread through the school like wildfire, creating a climate of real fear. Muggle-born students began traveling in groups, and an underground trade in protective amulets and talismans sprang up despite the staff's efforts to maintain calm. The Polyjuice plan gained new urgency. Hermione revealed her chosen brewing location, a girl's bathroom on the second floor that no one used because it was haunted by a miserable ghost named Moaning Myrtle. The ghost's presence ensured privacy, though her constant wailing and tendency to flood the bathroom made working conditions less than ideal. "I don't understand why I need to impersonate Crabbe," Ron complained as they sorted ingredients. "Couldn't I be Zabini instead? At least he's got functioning brain cells." "You need to be someone Malfoy trusts completely," Hermione explained patiently. "That's Crabbe and Goyle. Besides," Blaise smirked, "I'm not giving you any of my hair. Who knows what you might do while looking like me." "We still need to create a diversion to get into Snape's private stores," Theodore reminded them, consulting the recipe again. "These final ingredients are crucial." "Leave that to me and Ron," Harry volunteered. "We'll cause a distraction in potions tomorrow." Their opportunity came during a particularly challenging potions lesson involving a swelling solution. Harry waited until Snape's back was turned, then lobbed a filibuster firework into Goyle's cauldron. The resulting explosion covered half the class and the potion, creating pandemonium as noses, ears, and lips began swelling to alarming proportions. In the chaos, Hermione slipped into Snape's office and emerged moments later with her robes bulging. Snape, meanwhile, was restored order with a deflating draft while promising terrible punishment to the culprit. "If I ever find out who threw this," Snape whispered, holding up the twisted black remnant of the firework, "I shall make sure that person is expelled." Harry arranged his face into what he hoped was a puzzled expression. Snape was looking right at him, and the ice in his eyes told Harry that the professor suspected exactly who was responsible. With all the ingredients finally assembled, the Polyjuice potion began to brew. It would be ready by Christmas, hopefully not too late to prevent another attack. The second Quidditch match of the season, Hufflepuff vs Ravenclaw, came and went without incident, though Harry watched carefully for any sign of tampered equipment. The investigation into who had jinxed the bludger during the Slytherin-Gryffindor match had yielded no results, though Harry had his suspicions. "It has to be connected to the chamber," he insisted to his friends. "Someone wants me out of the way. Or someone thinks you're the heir and wants to stop you," Ron suggested. "Maybe it was just Quidditch rivalry," Hermione reasoned. "Not everything is connected to the chamber." But as November turned to December and the castle grew colder, another attack shattered any hope that the danger had passed. Justin Finch-Fletchley, a Hufflepuff Muggleborn, and nearly headless Nick were found petrified in a corridor. And this time, Harry was discovered at the scene by a group of students, having been drawn there once again by the mysterious voice no one else could hear. The double attack turned suspicion into near certainty for many students. Harry Potter, the Slytherin who was always around when attacks occurred, must be the heir. The fact that he'd been found talking to a snake at the dueling club the previous week, revealing himself as a Parselmouth, a rare ability strongly associated with Salazar Slytherin himself, only strengthened these suspicions. Within Slytherin House, this revelation had the opposite effect. Harry's status soared overnight. Parseltongue was considered a gift, a mark of special power that many pureblood families would envy. "You should have told us sooner, Potter," Marcus Flint commented, seeming genuinely impressed for once. "That's serious magical heritage." Even Malfoy seemed conflicted, his jealousy warring with a new, grudging respect. "Where did you learn Parseltongue?" he demanded one evening in the common room. "It's supposed to be hereditary." "I didn't learn it," Harry replied truthfully. "I didn't even know I could do it until recently. I thought everyone could understand snakes." This admission sparked renewed speculation about Harry's lineage. Could he be descended from Slytherin himself? The Potter family was old, but not known to carry the trait. Perhaps through his mother's line. But she was Muggle-born. The theories grew increasingly wild, but one thing was clear: Harry's position in Slytherin had fundamentally changed. No longer the outsider, he was now viewed as potentially one of their most elite members. This complicates things, Theodore observed as they prepared for bed. Everyone thinks you're the heir. It's ridiculous, Harry muttered. I'm trying to stop the attacks, not cause them. You might want to be careful about saying that too loudly in here, Blaise warned, nodding toward where Malfoy was whispering with Crabbe and Goyle. Some people are very invested in the idea of Slytherin's heir cleansing the school. Let them think what they want, Harry said firmly. I know what I believe in. But as he lay in bed that night, Harry couldn't help wondering about his ability to speak Parseltongue. It wasn't normal, even for wizards. And the Sorting Hat had wanted to put him in Slytherin immediately, had it sensed this connection? Was there something inside him, some quality or power, that truly belonged to Slytherin's legacy? These troubling thoughts followed him into dreams filled with hissing voices and long, dark corridors. As Christmas approached, Hogwarts emptied as most students fled home to escape the atmosphere of fear and suspicion. Harry, Ron, and Hermione remained, as did Theodore, though Blaise departed for an extended holiday with his mother in Italy. The Polyjuice potion was nearly complete, bubbling sluggishly in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Hermione tended it with the precision of a master potioneer, measuring ingredients and stirring according to the complex instructions. It's perfect timing, she explained as they gathered on Christmas Eve. The common rooms will be almost empty over the holiday. Less chance of running into the real Crabbe and Goyle. Or someone noticing I'm missing, Theodore added. He had reluctantly agreed to remain in the library during the interrogation to avoid suspicion, having a known friend of Harry's suddenly appearing in Draco's inner circle might raise alarm bells. We just need to get hair samples from Crabbe and Goyle, Hermione continued. And I've already solved that problem. She produced a plate of chocolate cakes with a flourish. Sleeping draught mixed with these. We leave them somewhere Crabbe and Goyle will find them, they eat them, they pass out, we take their hair, and hide them in a broom cupboard while we question Malfoy. Brilliant, Ron grinned. Those two will eat anything. What about you, Hermione? Harry asked. Who are you changing into? I've already got mine, she replied, showing them a small vial containing a single hair. Millicent Bulstrode. She went home for Christmas, so there's no risk of running into her. I got this off her robes during the dueling club. Their plan worked perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. Crabbe and Goyle, predictably unable to resist unattended cakes, collapsed minutes after consuming the drugged treats. Harry and Ron dragged their unconscious forms into a broom cupboard, taking care to collect several hairs from each. Back in the bathroom, Hermione divided the now complete Polyjuice potion into 3 glasses, each resembling thick, dark mud. Add the hairs, she instructed, dropping Millicent's into her own glass. The potion hissed loudly and turned a sickly yellow color. Harry and Ron exchanged disgusted looks before adding their hairs. Harry's potion turned khaki, while Ron's became a dark, murky brown. Cheers, Harry said without enthusiasm, and they drank. The transformation was immediate and excruciating. Harry felt like he was melting and reforming, his skin bubbling like hot wax, his bones stretching and grinding. When it finally stopped, he found himself looking at Goyle where Ron had stood. This is unbelievable, said Ron, examining Crabbe's large, gorilla-like arms. We'd better get going, said Harry, checking his watch. We've only got an hour before we change back. I don't think I'm coming after all, came Hermione's voice from her stall. You go on without me. Hermione, we know Millicent's ugly, but no one's going to know it's you, just go, she insisted. You're wasting time. Shrugging at each other, Harry and Ron left the bathroom and headed for the Slytherin dungeon. Finding the entrance was easy enough for Harry, but he realized with a start that he didn't know the current password, it had changed since he'd last used it. They were saved by a stroke of luck as a girl with long, curly hair emerged from a seemingly solid wall ahead. Excuse me, Harry called in Goyle's grunting voice. Forgot the new password. Honestly, Goyle, your memory gets worse every day, she sighed. It's pure blood. Harry and Ron exchanged dark looks as the stone wall opened to admit them. The Slytherin common room was quieter than usual due to the holidays, but still held a dozen or so students. Harry immediately spotted Draco Malfoy lounging in his favorite armchair by the fire. "There you are," Draco called lazily. "Where have you been? Pigging out in the Great Hall all this time?" Ron Crabbe nodded enthusiastically. "I'm surprised the mudbloods haven't all packed their bags by now," Malfoy continued as Harry and Ron took seats opposite him. "5 galleons says the next one dies. Pity it wasn't Granger." Harry felt Ron tense beside him and kicked him subtly under the table. "What's wrong with you, Crabbe?" snapped Malfoy. "Stomachache," Ron grunted. "Well, go to the hospital wing and give all those mudbloods a kick from me," Draco snickered. "You know, I'm surprised the Daily Prophet hasn't reported all these attacks yet. I suppose Dumbledore is trying to hush it all up. Father always said he was the worst thing that ever happened to this place." "You're wrong," Harry said automatically. Draco looked at him in surprise. "What? You think there's someone worse than Dumbledore, Goyle?" "Harry Potter?" Harry suggested quickly. Draco's face lit up. "You're right there. Saint Potter, the mudblood's friend, strutting around like he owns the place." He paused, reconsidering. "Though lately, I'm not so sure about Potter. That Parseltongue business was interesting. Father says that's a very respected skill." "Do you know who's behind the attacks?" Harry asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "You know I don't, Goyle. How many times do I have to tell you?" Malfoy snapped irritably. "Father won't tell me anything about the last time the chamber was opened either. Of course, it was 50 years ago, so it was before his time, but he knows all about it, and he says it was all kept quiet. But he does say one thing: last time the Chamber of Secrets was opened, a mudblood died. So I bet it's a matter of time before one of them's killed this time. I hope it's Granger." Ron's crab face contorted with fury, and Harry had to kick him again. "Father says the school needs ridding of all the mudblood filth, but not to get mixed up in it," Draco continued. "Says it's all supposed to be the work of the heir of Slytherin. Though I wouldn't be surprised if Potter's involved somehow. All that time hanging around with Weasley and Granger might be a clever cover." "But I thought you and your father would be right in the middle of it all," Harry ventured. "Isn't your family connected to Slytherin's line?" "I wish," Draco said resentfully. "No, the Malfoys are pure blood all the way back, but not direct descendants of Slytherin. Father's been much more interested in Potter lately, though. Says there might be more to him than we thought." Harry felt a chill at these words, but pressed on. "So your father doesn't know who opened the chamber last time?" "I told you, no," said Malfoy sharply. "But he does know about a secret diary that supposedly belonged to Slytherin's heir. Father says the diary has instructions for how to open the chamber and control what's inside. He was very interested when I told him about the message on the wall." Harry and Ron exchanged meaningful glances. A diary? Could this be connected to the small black book Harry had seen Lucius Malfoy slip into Ginny Weasley's cauldron in Flourish and Blots? Before they could ask more questions, Harry noticed with alarm that Ron's red hair was beginning to show at the roots of his crab disguise. Their hour was almost up. "Medicine for my stomach," Ron grunted suddenly, jumping to his feet. "I'll come with you," Harry added quickly. They hurried out of the common room and broke into a run once in the corridor, not stopping until they reached Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. As they burst through the door, their features were already melting back to normal. "Hermione, we've got loads to tell you," Harry called as they entered. "Go away," Moaning Myrtle gurgled from her toilet. "Wait till you see this," Ron added, approaching Hermione's stall. "We think we know about a diary that—" The stall door opened slowly, and both boys gasped. Hermione stood before them, her face covered in black fur. Her eyes had turned yellow, and pointed ears poked through her bushy hair. "It was a cat hair," she wailed. Millicent Bulstrode must have a cat. The potion isn't supposed to be used for animal transformations. Oh, no, said Harry. You'll be teased something dreadful, said Myrtle happily. It's okay, Hermione, said Ron quickly. We'll take you up to the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey never asks too many questions. It took some time to persuade Hermione to leave the bathroom. Moaning Myrtle sped them on their way with a hearty guffaw. Wait till everyone finds out you've got a tail. Hermione remained in the hospital wing for several weeks, giving the others time to process what they'd learned from Malfoy. Harry shared their findings with Theodore, who seemed particularly interested in the mention of a diary. A diary with instructions for opening the chamber, Theodore mused as they sat in a quiet corner of the library. And you think Mr. Malfoy gave it to Ginny Weasley? Why would he do that? To cause trouble? Harry suggested. Get rid of Muggleborns and hurt the Weasleys at the same time. But why Ginny specifically? And why a diary? It doesn't make sense. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Ron, looking worried. Have you seen Ginny lately? He asked without preamble. Not since Christmas, Harry replied. Why? She's acting strange. Pale, jumpy, not eating. Percy thinks she's coming down with something, but... Ron hesitated. What if it's connected to that diary you mentioned? What if Malfoy's father did something to her? This possibility had occurred to Harry as well. We should try to talk to her, he agreed. See if she still has the diary. Finding Ginny proved surprisingly difficult. She seemed to be avoiding everyone, even her brothers. When they finally cornered her in a corridor, her appearance was shocking, dark circles under her eyes, skin as white as chalk, her red hair dull and lifeless. Ginny, Ron began awkwardly, are you feeling all right? I'm fine, she mumbled, not meeting their eyes. Just tired. We were wondering, Harry said gently, did you get a diary at some point? Maybe a small black book. Ginny's reaction was immediate and alarming. She jerked as though electrified, her eyes widening in terror. What? Why would you ask about? I don't have. I have to go. She fled down the corridor before they could stop her. That's not normal, Theodore observed quietly. No, Harry agreed grimly. I think we found our connection. The weeks that followed brought new challenges. Hermione finally returned from the hospital wing, fur-free but embarrassed. The Slytherin Hufflepuff Quidditch match ended in an easy victory for Harry's team, though he took no pleasure in beating a house still devastated by the attack on Justin. And someone broke into the Gryffindor second-year boys' dormitory, ransacking Harry's belongings. Nothing seems to be missing, Ron reported after checking with Dean and Seamus. But they went through everything, especially your trunk. Looking for something specific, then, Theodore concluded. But what? The answer came in an unexpected form. While walking alone one evening, Harry literally stumbled across a small, soggy black book lying in a puddle outside Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The name on the water-damaged cover read, T.M. Riddle. Someone tried to flush it away, Harry realized, examining the diary. It appeared to be 50 years old, matching the time frame of the last chamber opening, but the pages were completely blank. He took it to show the others, gathering in their usual classroom hideout. T.M. Riddle, Hermione read, running her fingers over the name. That sounds familiar. It should, said Theodore tensely. Tom Marvolo Riddle won a special award for services to the school 50 years ago. It's in the trophy room. 50 years ago? Harry repeated. When the chamber was last opened? Exactly. And I think I know why. Theodore's face had gone pale. My father mentioned him once. Before he took another name, the Dark Lord was called Tom Riddle. A stunned silence followed this revelation. You're saying this is you-know-whose diary? Ron finally managed, staring at the innocent-looking book with horror. It would explain why Lucius Malfoy had it, Theodore continued. And why he'd want it back in circulation. If it contains instructions for opening the chamber. Then why was someone trying to get rid of it? Hermione wondered. Jinny, Harry realized suddenly. It must have been Jinny. She's been acting terrified for months. What if the diary was doing something to her? Controlling her somehow? But there's nothing written in it, Ron objected, flipping through the blank pages. Not that we can see, Hermione corrected him. It could be enchanted. Harry felt a sudden impulse. Taking out a quill, he touched it to the first blank page and wrote, "My name is Harry Potter." The words shone momentarily on the page, then sank without trace. Then, something happened. Oozing back out of the page, in his very own ink, came words Harry had never written. "Hello, Harry Potter. My name is Tom Riddle. How did you come by my diary?" The 5 friends exchanged alarmed looks. "What do I do?" Harry whispered. "Write back," Theodore urged. "But be careful what you reveal." Harry hesitated, then wrote, "Someone tried to flush it down a toilet. Lucky that I recorded my memories in some more lasting way than ink," the diary responded. "But I always knew there would be those who would not want this diary read. I've been waiting for you, Harry Potter." A chill ran down Harry's spine. "What do you mean?" "I can show you my memory of the night I caught the person who opened the Chamber of Secrets last time." The diary's offer was too intriguing to resist. Against his friend's warnings, Harry agreed, and felt himself tipped forward into the pages, falling through time into Riddle's memory. What he witnessed was shocking, Riddle confronting a much younger Hagrid, accusing him of opening the chamber and keeping a monstrous spider that had killed a girl. The memory ended with Hagrid being expelled and Riddle receiving his award. No way was Hagrid the heir of Slytherin, Ron declared when Harry recounted what he'd seen. "That's ridiculous." "It's a misdirection," Theodore said firmly. Riddle was framing him. "But why show me that memory specifically?" Harry wondered. "What's Riddle, I mean, Voldemort, trying to achieve?" "To manipulate you," Hermione suggested. "Make you distrust Hagrid, maybe." "Or to establish credibility," Theodore said darkly. "Make himself seem trustworthy before asking for something." Harry stared at the diary with growing unease. "I think we need to destroy this." Despite their attempts, the diary proved remarkably resilient to damage. Hermione tried several destructive spells to no effect. Eventually, they decided the safest option was to hide it in Harry's trunk under multiple protective charms. Spring arrived, bringing a more cheerful atmosphere to the castle. No new attacks had occurred since Justin and nearly headless Nick, and the mandrakes needed for the restorative potion were maturing nicely. Professor Sprout reported they would soon be ready for cutting. The second years were given something new to think about during Easter holidays. It was time to choose their subjects for third year. Hermione took this process extremely seriously, creating complex charts of subject combinations and career paths. "It could affect our whole future," she insisted when Ron mocked her thoroughness. Harry found himself drawn to the subjects that seemed most practical, care of magical creatures and divination, while Theodore selected ancient runes and arithmancy, and Blaise chose a similar combination with the addition of care of magical creatures. "I'm keeping my options open," Blaise explained with a shrug. "Never know when understanding a hippogriff might save your life." The relative calm was shattered the night before the Gryffindor-Hufflepuff Quidditch match. Harry was awakened by Theodore shaking his shoulder urgently. "Potter, wake up. Something's happened." Harry sat up groggily. "What's going on?" "There's been another attack," Theodore reported grimly. 2 students this time. "And, they've taken Hagrid." "What?" Harry was instantly alert. "Dumbledore's been suspended too," Theodore continued, his voice low to avoid waking their roommates. "Board of Governors' decision, led by Lucius Malfoy." Harry dressed hurriedly, and they slipped out of the dormitory. The Slytherin common room was abuzz with late-night activity as prefects relayed information to nervous students. The victims were Hermione Granger and a Ravenclaw prefect, a sixth year was saying. Found near the library with a mirror. Harry felt as though he'd been punched in the stomach. Hermione. Theodore grabbed his arm before he could react visibly. Steady, Potter. Not here. They retreated to a corner where they could speak privately. How did you find out about Hagrid? Harry demanded. I overheard Snape telling the prefects. Ministry officials came and took him to Azkaban, the wizard prison. They think he's behind the attacks because of what happened last time. That's ridiculous. Hagrid wouldn't, I know, Theodore cut him off. But with Dumbledore gone, nobody's going to listen to reason. Especially not with 2 more victims. Harry's mind raced. Without Dumbledore, the school felt suddenly vulnerable. Without Hermione, their investigation had lost its academic foundation. And with Hagrid in Azkaban, there was no one left who might know what really happened 50 years ago. We need to talk to Ron, Harry decided. And we need to figure out what's in the chamber. They found Ron in the hospital wing the next morning, sitting beside Hermione's petrified form. His face was haggard with worry and lack of sleep. I can't believe this happened to her, he said hollowly. She was just going to the library to check something, said she'd finally figured it out. Figured what out? Harry asked. I don't know. She ran off saying she needed to confirm a theory. Ron looked up at them, tears threatening. And now she's, like this. Harry studied Hermione's frozen face, her expression one of shock with her hand still outstretched, holding something, a small mirror. Why was she carrying a mirror, he wondered aloud. Maybe she realized she'd be next, Theodore suggested quietly. Think about it, a powerful Muggle-born witch, friends with Harry Potter, she was a prime target. But what was she looking for in the library? Harry pressed. It must have been important for her to go alone. They searched her school bag, still in the possession of Madame Pomfrey, but found nothing unusual. Whatever Hermione had discovered, she hadn't written it down. The atmosphere at Hogwarts grew increasingly tense following Dumbledore's removal. Teachers escorted students between classes, all evening activities were cancelled, and a strict curfew was enforced. The Quidditch match was postponed indefinitely. Within Slytherin, opinions were deeply divided. Many students from traditional families openly celebrated Dumbledore's departure, while others worried that without his protection, the attacks would escalate. Harry found himself isolated from both camps, neither willing to join the celebration nor accepted by those genuinely concerned. We need to solve this ourselves, Harry told Theodore and Ron as they met secretly in an unused classroom. No one else is going to help us. But how? Ron asked desperately. Hermione was the one who always figured things out. Without her, we still have her notes, Harry interrupted, spreading out parchments they'd collected from Hermione's trunk with permission from Professor McGonagall. And we have our brains. She'd expect us to continue. They pored over Hermione's research for hours, trying to piece together what she might have discovered. Most of her notes focused on various magical creatures that could petrify victims, but none seemed to match all the circumstances. Wait, said Theodore suddenly, pulling out a page covered in Hermione's neat handwriting. Look at this, she's circled pipes several times and written bathrooms in the margin. Pipes? Ron frowned. What does plumbing have to do with the chamber? It could be how the monster moves around the castle, Harry realized. That's why no one sees it between attacks. And bathrooms. Theodore's eyes widened. The girl who died last time, what if she never left the scene of her death? Moaning Myrtle, Harry breathed. Of course. Their breakthrough was interrupted by Professor McGonagall's magically amplified voice echoing through the corridors. All students returned to their house dormitories immediately. All teachers to the staff room. Immediately, please. Harry, Ron, and Theodore exchanged alarmed looks. Another attack? Ron whispered fearfully. We need to know what's happening, Harry decided. Let's go to the staff room. Under Harry's invisibility cloak, they hurried to the staff room and concealed themselves in a wardrobe just as the teachers began arriving. McGonagall's face was ashen as she addressed her colleagues. The worst has happened, she announced. A student has been taken by the monster. Right into the chamber itself. Shocked gasps filled the room. Who is it? Whispered Professor Hooch. Ginny Weasley, said McGonagall, and Harry felt Ron slide down beside him, silently mouthing his sister's name in horror. We shall have to send all the students home tomorrow, McGonagall continued. This is the end of Hogwarts. The staff room door banged open again. For a wild moment, Harry thought it would be Dumbledore, returning to save them all. But it was Lockhart, beaming around the room. So sorry, dozed off, what have I missed? The other teachers stared at him with something like hatred. Snape stepped forward. Just the man, he said silkily. The very man. A girl has been snatched by the monster, Lockhart. Taken into the Chamber of Secrets itself. Your moment has come at last. Lockhart blanched. That's settled then, said McGonagall, cutting across Lockhart's stammered excuses. We'll leave it to you, then, Gilderoy. Tonight will be an excellent time to do it. We'll make sure everyone's out of your way. You'll be able to tackle the monster all by yourself. A free rein at last. Lockhart gazed desperately around him, but nobody came to his rescue. He looked suddenly feeble, his handsome face reduced to a pale mask of fear. Very well, he said. I'll be in my office, getting ready. And he left the room. Right, said McGonagall, nostrils flaring, that's got him out from under our feet. The heads of houses should go and inform their students what has happened. Tell them the Hogwarts Express will take them home first thing tomorrow. As the teachers filed out, Harry, Ron, and Theodore emerged from their hiding place, Ron shaking with silent grief. We have to go after her, he choked out. We can't leave Jinny down there with. We won't, Harry assured him firmly. But first, we need to talk to Myrtle. What about Lockhart? Theodore asked. He's supposedly going to the chamber. He's a fraud, Harry said dismissively. But he might have information the teachers gave him. Let's see him first, then find Myrtle. They found Lockhart in his office, not preparing to face the monster but hastily packing his belongings. When confronted, he admitted his books were filled with achievements he'd stolen from other wizards before modifying their memories. So you're just going to leave? Harry demanded, disgusted. After everything you've claimed you could do? Well, yes, Lockhart replied, continuing to stuff robes into his trunk. Got to get going, urgent call, unavoidable. You can't. Ron shouted. My sister's down there. Lockhart's response was to draw his wand, revealing his intention to erase their memories too. But Harry was faster, disarming him with a well-placed Expelliarmus. Looks like those dueling club lessons weren't completely useless, Theodore remarked dryly, training his own wand on the cowering professor. You're coming with us, Harry informed Lockhart. We need an adult present for what we're about to do. With Lockhart at one point, they proceeded to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The ghost seemed almost pleased by their visit, particularly the prospect of sharing how she had died. It was dreadful, she said with relish. I was hiding in here because Olive Hornby was teasing me about my glasses. I was crying, and then I heard somebody come in. They said something funny, a different language, I think it was. Anyway, what really got me was that it was a boy speaking. So I unlocked the door to tell him to go away, and then, Myrtle swelled importantly, I died. How? Asked Harry. No idea, said Myrtle in hushed tones. I just remember seeing a pair of great, big, yellow eyes. My whole body sort of seized up, and then I was floating away. She looked dreamily at Harry. And then I came back. I was determined to haunt Olive Hornby, you see. Where exactly did you see the eyes? Harry asked. Somewhere there, said Myrtle, pointing vaguely toward the sink opposite her toilet. Harry, Ron, and Theodore rushed to examine the sink. It looked ordinary enough, but when Harry squinted at the copper tap, he saw a tiny snake scratched on the side. That tap's never worked, said Myrtle as he tried to turn it. Harry, said Ron. Say something in Parseltongue. Harry stared at the tiny engraving, trying to imagine it was real. Open up, he said, but the words came out in English. Try again, Theodore urged. Harry concentrated harder, focusing on the serpentine image until it seemed to move in the dim light. Open, he commanded, but this time what came out was a strange hissing sound. At once, the sink began to move. The sink, in fact, sank right out of sight, leaving a large pipe exposed, a pipe wide enough for a man to slide into. I'm going down there, Harry announced. Me too, said Ron, his face pale but determined. Theodore hesitated only briefly. Count me in. Can't let you Gryffindors have all the glory. Well, you hardly seem to need me, said Lockhart, a shadow of his old smile flickering across his face. You're going first, Ron snarled, pointing his wand at Lockhart's heart. White-faced and wandless, Lockhart approached the opening. What good will it do? He asked weakly. Better you than us, said Ron roughly. Get in. Lockhart slid his legs into the pipe and, with Harry's encouragement in the form of a jabbed wand, disappeared down the dark tunnel. Ron followed quickly, then Theodore, and finally Harry. It was like rushing down an endless, slimy, dark slide. Harry could see other pipes branching off in all directions, but none as large as the one they were in, which twisted and turned, sloping steeply downward. Behind him, he could hear Theodore swearing colorfully as they hurtled around another bend. Then, just as he was beginning to wonder what would happen when they hit the ground, the pipe leveled out, and he shot out of the end with a wet thud, landing on the damp floor of a dark stone tunnel large enough to stand in. We must be miles under the school, Harry said, his voice echoing in the black tunnel. Under the lake, probably, said Ron, squinting around at the dark, slimy walls. Lumos. Theodore muttered, and the tip of his wand illuminated the passage ahead, revealing bones of small animals scattered across the floor. Let's go, Harry said, leading the way forward with Lockhart stumbling ahead of them at one point. The tunnel stretched on, every nerve in Harry's body tingling with anticipation. Then, as they rounded another bend, they saw something enormous and curved lying across the tunnel. It wasn't moving. Maybe it's asleep, Ron breathed, voice quavering. But as they drew closer, Harry's wandlight revealed it was a gigantic snake skin, vivid, poisonous green, lying curled and empty across the tunnel floor. The creature that had shed it must have been at least 20 feet long. Blimey, said Ron weakly. Lockhart suddenly collapsed to his knees. Get up, said Ron sharply, pointing his wand at him. But Lockhart didn't get up. Instead, he dived at Ron, knocking him to the ground. A brief scuffle ensued, ending with Lockhart straightening up, panting, Ron's wand in his hand. The adventure ends here, boys, he declared, his gleaming smile back in place. I'll take a bit of this skin back up to the school, tell them I was too late to save the girl, and that you three tragically lost your minds at the sight of her mangled body. Say goodbye to your memories. He raised Ron's spell-taped wand high over his head and yelled, Obliviate. The wand exploded with the force of a small bomb. Harry and Theodore flung their arms over their heads and ran, slipping over the coils of snake skin, out of the way of great chunks of tunnel ceiling that were thundering to the floor. When the dust cleared, they found themselves facing a solid wall of broken rock. Ron! Harry shouted. Are you okay? Ron! I'm here, came Ron's muffled voice from behind the rockfall. I'm okay, this gets not, though, he got blasted by my wand. There was a dull thud and a loud, ow. It sounded as though Ron had just kicked Lockhart. What now? Ron's voice called. We can't get through, it'll take ages. Wait there, Harry called. I'll go on. If I'm not back in an hour. There was a very pregnant pause. I'll try to shift some of this rock, said Ron, his voice now very small. So you can get back through. I'm coming with you, Potter, Theodore announced quietly. 2 wands are better than 1. Harry looked at his friend, a boy raised in a family that likely supported Voldemort, now risking his life to save a Weasley. You don't have to, I know, Theodore cut him off. Let's go. They set off past the snake skin, and soon the distant sound of shifting rock was gone. The tunnel turned and turned again, every nerve in Harry's body tingling unpleasantly. He wanted the tunnel to end, yet dreaded what they'd find when it did. And then, at last, as they crept around yet another bend, they saw a solid wall ahead on which 2 entwined serpents were carved, their eyes set with great, glinting emeralds. Your turn again, Theodore whispered. Harry approached, his throat dry. There was no need to pretend these stone snakes were real, their eyes seemed to flicker with life in the wand light. He cleared his throat, and the emerald eyes seemed to flash. Open, he said, in a low, faint hiss. The serpents parted as the wall cracked open, the halves sliding smoothly out of sight. Harry and Theodore, shaking from head to foot, walked inside. They stood at the end of a very long, dimly lit chamber. Towering stone pillars carved with more serpents rose to support a ceiling lost in darkness. The chamber's greenish gloom gave the place an underwater quality, heightened by the dark shadows thrown by their wand light. Look, Theodore whispered, pointing ahead. A statue high as the chamber itself loomed into view against the far wall, ancient and monkeyish, with a long, thin beard that fell almost to the bottom of the wizard's sweeping stone robes, where 2 enormous grey feet stood on the smooth chamber floor. And between the feet, face down, lay a small, black-robed figure with flaming red hair. Jinny! Harry cried, sprinting to her and dropping to his knees. Jinny, don't be dead, please don't be dead. He flung his wand aside, grabbed her shoulders, and turned her over. Her face was white as marble, and as cold, yet her eyes were closed, so she wasn't petrified. Jinny, please wake up, Harry muttered desperately, shaking her. She won't wake, said a soft voice. Harry startled and spun around, still on his knees. Theodore turned sharply too, wand raised. A tall, black-haired boy was leaning against the nearest pillar, watching. He was strangely blurred around the edges, as though Harry were looking at him through a misted window. But there was no mistaking him, Tom Riddle. Riddle nodded, not taking his eyes off Harry's face. What do you mean, she won't wake? Harry said desperately. She's not. She's still alive, said Riddle. But only just. Theodore took a step forward, placing himself slightly in front of Harry, wand aimed at Riddle's chest. Who are you really? He demanded. No memory does what you're doing. Riddle smiled broadly. Perceptive. You must be Theodore not. Jinny wrote about you too, Harry Potter's clever Slytherin friend. How very interesting. How are you here? Harry asked, standing slowly. A memory, said Riddle quietly. Preserved in a diary for 50 years. He pointed toward the floor near the statue's giant toes. Lying open there was the little black diary Harry had found in the toilet. For a second, Harry wondered how it had gotten there, but there were more pressing matters to deal with. You've got to help us, Tom, he said, raising Jinny's head again. We've got to get her out of here. There's a basilisk. I don't know where it is, but it could come along any moment. Riddle didn't move. Harry struggled to hoist Jinny half off the floor, looking around for his discarded wand. Did you see my? He looked up and found Riddle twirling Harry's wand between his long fingers. Thanks, said Harry, stretching out his hand for it. A smile curled the corners of Riddle's mouth. He continued to stare at Harry, twirling the wand idly. Listen, said Harry urgently, his knees sagging with Jinny's dead weight. "We've got to go. If the basilisk comes, it won't come until it's called," said Riddle calmly. "Drop the wand," Theodore commanded, his own still pointed steadily at Riddle. "Now. The son of Cantankerous not giving me orders." Riddle laughed softly. "Your father would be most displeased." Theodore's eyes narrowed. "You know my father?" "I know all the old families," Riddle replied smoothly. "And they know me, though perhaps by a different name now." Harry lowered Jinny back onto the floor, unable to support her weight any longer. "What do you mean?" he asked, though a horrible realization was dawning on him. "I've waited a long time for this, Harry Potter," said Riddle. "For the chance to see you. To speak to you." "Why would you want to see me?" asked Harry, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Jinny told me all about you, Harry," said Riddle. "Your whole fascinating history." His eyes roved over the lightning scar on Harry's forehead, his expression growing hungrier. "I knew I must find out more about you, talk to you, meet you if I could. So I decided to show you my famous capture of that great oaf, Hagrid, to gain your trust." "Hagrid's my friend," said Harry, anger bubbling in his voice. "And you framed him, didn't you?" Riddle laughed his high, cold laugh. "It was my word against Hagrid's, Harry. Who was going to believe him? Only Dumbledore seemed to think Hagrid was innocent." "I bet Dumbledore saw right through you," said Harry, teeth gritted. "He certainly kept an annoyingly close watch on me after Hagrid was expelled," said Riddle carelessly. "I knew it wouldn't be safe to open the chamber again while I was still at school. But I wasn't going to waste those long years I'd spent searching for it. I left behind a diary, preserving my 16-year-old self in its pages, so that one day, I would be able to lead another in my footsteps, and finish Salazar Slytherin's noble work." "You've been using Jinny," Theodore realized aloud. "Making her open the chamber and set the basilisk on Muggleborns." "Very good," Riddle applauded mockingly. "Yes, little Jinny Weasley opened the Chamber of Secrets. She strangled the school roosters and daubed threatening messages on the walls. She set the Serpent of Slytherin on 4 mudbloods, and the Squib's cat." "No," Harry whispered. "Oh yes," said Riddle. "Of course, she didn't know what she was doing at first. It was very amusing. I wish you could have seen her diary entries. Far more interesting, they became. Dear Tom," he recited, watching Harry's horrified face, "I think I'm losing my memory. There are rooster feathers all over my robes and I don't know how they got there. Dear Tom, I can't remember what I did on the night of Halloween, but a cat was attacked and I've got paint all down my front." Riddle's voice grew higher, colder. It took a very long time for stupid little Jinny to stop trusting her diary. But she finally became suspicious and tried to dispose of it. "And that's where you came in, Harry. You found it, and I couldn't have been more delighted. Of all the people who could have picked it up, it was you, the very person I was most anxious to meet." "And why did you want to meet me?" Harry asked, anger coursing through him. "Jinny told me all about you, Harry," said Riddle. "How you survived when the greatest wizard of all time tried to kill you. How you escaped with nothing but a scar, while Lord Voldemort's powers were destroyed." There was an odd red gleam in his hungry eyes now. "So that's what this is about," Theodore said quietly. "You're obsessed with the boy who defeated your future self." Riddle's head snapped toward Theodore. "Very clever indeed. Jinny mentioned you were sharp," said Harry was lucky to have such a cunning friend. "I wonder if you'll be as loyal when you learn the truth." "What truth?" Harry demanded. "Lord Voldemort," said Riddle softly, "is my past, present, and future, Harry Potter." He pulled Harry's wand from his pocket and began to trace it through the air, writing 3 shimmering words, Tom Marvolo Riddle. Then he waved the wand once, and the letters of his name rearranged themselves. "I am Lord Voldemort, you see," he whispered. "It was a name I was already using at Hogwarts, to my most intimate friends only, of course. You think I was going to use my filthy Muggle father's name forever? I, in whose veins runs the blood of Salazar Slytherin himself, through my mother's side. I, keep the name of a foul, common muggle, who abandoned me even before I was born, just because he found out his wife was a witch? Riddle was pacing now, his blurred outline becoming more solid with each passing minute. No, Harry. I fashioned myself a new name, a name I knew wizards everywhere would one day fear to speak, when I had become the greatest sorcerer in the world. You're not, said Harry, his quiet voice full of hatred. Not what? Snapped Riddle. Not the greatest sorcerer in the world, said Harry, breathing fast. Sorry to disappoint you, but the greatest wizard in the world is Albus Dumbledore. Everyone says so. Even when you were strong, you didn't dare try to take over at Hogwarts. Dumbledore saw through you when you were at school, and he still frightens you now, wherever you're hiding these days. The smile had gone from Riddle's face, to be replaced by a very ugly look. Dumbledore's been driven out of this castle by the mere memory of me. He's not as gone as you might think. Harry retorted. Music was coming from somewhere, unearthly, spine-tingling, phoenix song. It grew louder and louder, and then flames erupted at the top of the nearest pillar. A crimson bird the size of a swan appeared, piping its weird music to the vaulted ceiling. It had a glittering golden tail as long as a peacock's and gleaming golden talons, which were gripping a ragged bundle. A second later, the bird was flying straight at Harry. It dropped the ragged thing it was carrying at his feet, then landed heavily on his shoulder. As it folded its great wings, Harry looked up and saw it had a long, sharp golden beak and a beady black eye. That's a phoenix, said Riddle, staring shrewdly back at it. Fox. Harry breathed. And that, said Riddle, now eyeing the ragged thing that Fox had dropped, that's the old-school sorting hat, so it was. Patched, frayed, and dirty, the hat lay motionless at Harry's feet. Riddle began to laugh again. This is what Dumbledore sends his defender. A songbird and an old hat. Theodore moved closer to Harry, his wand still raised. Don't underestimate Dumbledore, he warned. Or Harry. Ah, yes, said Riddle, amused. The faithful Slytherin friend. I admit, I'm curious, what makes a son of the sacred 28 stand with a half-blood against the heir of Slytherin himself? Because I make my own choices, Theodore replied steadily. Unlike you, hiding in the shadow of your ancestor's name. Riddle's handsome face contorted with rage. You dare, yes, he dares, Harry cut in. We both do. It doesn't matter that you're Slytherin's heir. It doesn't matter that I'm in Slytherin. What matters is right and wrong, and you're wrong, Riddle. You've always been wrong. Well, Potter, said Riddle, controlling his anger and smiling again, I think it's time we matched the powers of Lord Voldemort, heir of Salazar Slytherin, against the famous Harry Potter and his Slytherin turncoat. He cast an amused eye over Fawkes and the Sorting Hat, then walked away to stand between the high pillars and look up into the stone face of Slytherin, high above him in the half-darkness. Riddle opened his mouth wide and hissed, but Harry understood what he was saying. Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four. Harry wheeled around to look up at the statue. Fawkes swayed on his shoulder. The gigantic stone face was moving, the mouth opening wider and wider to make a huge black hole. And something was stirring inside the statue's mouth. Something was slithering up from its depths. Kill them, Riddle hissed in Parseltongue. Run! Harry shouted to Theodore, grabbing his arm. They bolted as something huge hit the stone floor of the chamber. Harry could feel it moving behind them and heard Riddle's hissing laughter echoing around them. Don't look at its eyes! Theodore yelled, pulling Harry behind a pillar as the enormous serpent slithered past. Harry shut his eyes tightly, feeling his way blindly along the wall. Fawkes's wing brushed his cheek as he took flight. Harry wanted to call for him to come back. What chance did a phoenix have against the king of serpents? Something soft hit Harry's face. He opened his eyes just enough to see what it was, recognizing the Sorting Hat. As he grabbed it, something long and hard thumped onto the top of his head. Stars winked in front of Harry's eyes, but he grabbed at whatever had appeared, pulling it out of the hat, a gleaming silver sword with rubies the size of eggs embedded in the hilt. "Potter!" Theodore called from behind another pillar. "I'll distract it, you get the sword." Before Harry could protest, Theodore darted out, firing spells at the basilisk. Riddle laughed coldly. "Your friend is brave but foolish, Potter. Watch him die." The basilisk turned toward Theodore, who was casting every hex and jinx he knew. The spells bounced harmlessly off the creature's magically resistant scales, but they did draw its attention. As Theodore dove behind a pillar, Harry seized his chance. He ran forward, sword in hand, and as the basilisk turned back toward him, he held the blade aloft. Fawkes suddenly soared back into the chamber, directly at the basilisk's face, and Harry saw that the phoenix had blinded the serpent, its eyes punctured by the bird's sharp beak. "No!" Riddle screamed. "Leave the bird. The boy is behind you. You can still smell him. Kill him." The blinded serpent swayed, confused but still deadly. Harry stood his ground, ready to plunge the sword into the creature when it struck. The basilisk lunged blindly. Harry drove the sword with both hands up to the hilt into the roof of the serpent's mouth. But as warm blood drenched Harry's arms, he felt a searing pain just above his elbow. One long, poisonous fang was sinking deeper and deeper into his arm. It splintered as the basilisk keeled over sideways and fell, twitching, to the floor. Harry slid down the wall, gripping the fang that was spreading poison through his body. He pulled it out, but he knew it was too late. White-hot pain spread slowly and steadily from the wound. "Harry!" Theodore was at his side instantly, horror on his face. "You're dead, Harry Potter," Riddle's voice echoed above them. "Dead. Even Dumbledore's bird knows it. Do you see what he's doing, Potter? He's crying." Harry blinked hazily. Fawkes had indeed landed beside him, his pearly tears falling onto the wound left by the fang. But Riddle was wrong, the pain was fading. The wound was healing before his eyes. "Get away, bird," said Riddle suddenly. "Get away from him," I said, "get away." Harry raised his head. Riddle was pointing Harry's wand at Fawkes. There was a bang like a gun, and Fawkes took flight again in a swirl of gold and scarlet. "Phoenix tears," said Riddle quietly, staring at Harry's arm. "Of course, healing powers. I forgot." He looked into Harry's face. "But it makes no difference. In fact, I prefer it this way. Just you and me, Harry Potter. You and me." He raised the wand, then, in a rush of wings, Fawkes had soared back overhead and something fell into Harry's lap, the diary. Without thinking, without considering, as though he had always meant to do it, Harry seized the basilisk fang on the floor next to him and plunged it straight into the heart of the book. There was a long, dreadful, piercing scream. Ink spurted out of the diary in torrents, streaming over Harry's hands, flooding the floor. Riddle was writhing and twisting, screaming and flailing, and then, he was gone. Harry's wand fell to the floor with a clatter and there was silence. Silence except for the steady drip of ink still oozing from the diary. The basilisk venom had burned a sizzling hole right through it. "Is he gone?" Theodore asked, lowering his wand at last. "I think so," Harry replied shakily, getting to his feet. A faint moan came from the end of the chamber. Jinny was stirring. Harry and Theodore hurried toward her as she sat up, her bemused eyes traveling from the huge form of the dead basilisk, over Harry, in his blood-soaked robes, then to the diary in his hand. She drew a great, shuddering gasp and tears began to pour down her face. "Harry, oh, Harry, I tried to tell you at breakfast, but I couldn't say it in front of Percy. It was me, Harry, but I swear I didn't mean to. Our Riddle made me, he took me over, and, how did you kill that thing?" "Where's Riddle?" "The last thing I remember is him coming out of the diary." "It's all right," said Harry, holding up the diary, and showing Jinny the fang hole. "Riddle's finished." Look. Him and the basilisk. Come on, Jinny, let's get out of here, I'm going to be expelled. Jinny wept as Harry helped her awkwardly to her feet. I've looked forward to coming to Hogwarts ever since B-Bill came and now I'll have to leave and waddle Mum and Dad say. You won't be expelled, Theodore said firmly. It wasn't your fault. You were being controlled. Jinny's tear-streaked face turned to him, noticing his Slytherin robes with surprise and fear. He's right, Harry added quickly. Theo's my friend. He helped save you. Fawkes was waiting for them, hovering in the chamber entrance. Harry urged Jinny forward, they stepped over the motionless coils of the dead basilisk, through the echoing gloom, and back into the tunnel. Harry heard the stone doors close behind them with a soft hiss. After a few minutes' progress up the dark tunnel, a distant rumbling sound greeted their ears. Ron! Harry yelled, speeding up. Jinny's okay. We've got her. They heard Ron give a strangled cheer, and they turned the next bend to see his eager face staring through the sizable gap he had managed to make in the rockfall. Jinny! Ron thrust an arm through the gap in the rock to pull her through first. You're alive. I don't believe it. What happened? How, what, where did that bird come from? Fawkes had swooped through the gap after Jinny. He's Dumbledore's, said Harry, squeezing through himself, followed by Theodore. Not. Ron exclaimed, surprised. You went with Harry? I did, Theodore replied simply. He was brilliant, Harry said firmly, hoping Ron would understand. But Ron began, then looked at his rescued sister and seemed to reconsider whatever he'd been about to say. Thanks, he said awkwardly to Theodore instead. How come you've got a sword, said Ron, gaping at the glittering weapon in Harry's hand. I'll explain when we get out of here, said Harry with a sideways glance at Jinny, who was crying harder than ever. But, later, Harry said shortly. Where's Lockhart? Back there, said Ron, jerking his head up the tunnel. He's in a bad way. Come and see. Led by Fawkes, whose wide scarlet wings emitted a soft golden glow in the darkness, they walked all the way back to the mouth of the pipe. Gilderoy Lockhart was sitting there, humming placidly to himself. His memory's gone, said Ron. The memory charm backfired. Hit him instead of us. Hasn't got a clue who he is, or where he is, or who we are. I told him to wait here. Lockhart peered good-naturedly up at them all. Hello, he said. Odd sort of place, this, isn't it? Do you live here? No, said Ron, raising his eyebrows at Harry. Harry bent down and looked up the long, dark pipe. Have you thought how we're going to get back up this? He asked Ron. Fawkes the Phoenix swooped past Harry and was now fluttering in front of him, his beady eyes bright in the dark. He was waving his long golden tail feathers. He looks like he wants you to grab hold. Said Ron, looking perplexed. But you're much too heavy for a bird to pull up there, Fawkes, said Harry, turning to the others, isn't an ordinary bird. He turned quickly to the others. We've got to hold on to each other. Jinny, grab Ron's hand. Professor Lockhart, he means you, said Ron sharply to Lockhart. You hold Jinny's other hand. Theo, you take mine. And Harry, I'll grab Fawkes's tail, said Harry. An extraordinary lightness seemed to spread through his whole body and the next second, in a rush of wings, they were flying upward through the pipe. Lockhart was calling out, amazing. Amazing. This is just like magic. The chill air was whipping through Harry's hair, and before he'd stopped enjoying the ride, it was over. All five of them were hitting the wet floor of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and the sink that hid the pipe was sliding back into place. You're alive, said Myrtle blankly to Harry. No need to sound so disappointed, he said grimly, wiping flecks of blood and slime off his glasses. Oh, well. I'd just been thinking, if you had died, you'd have been welcome to share my toilet, said Myrtle, blushing silver. Ugh, said Ron as they left the bathroom for the dark, deserted corridor outside. Harry. I think Myrtle's got a crush on you." "Where now?" asked Ron, with an anxious look at Jinny. She was still crying silently. Fawkes was leading the way, glowing gold along the corridor. They followed him, and moments later found themselves at the entrance to Professor McGonagall's office. Harry knocked, and pushed the door open. For a moment there was silence as Harry, Ron, Jinny, Theodore, and Lockhart stood in the doorway, covered in muck and slime and, in Harry's case, blood. Then there was a scream. "Jinny!" It was Mrs. Weasley, who had been sitting crying in front of the fire. She leapt to her feet, closely followed by Mr. Weasley, and both of them flung themselves on their daughter. Harry, however, was looking past them. Professor Dumbledore was standing by the mantelpiece, beaming, next to Professor McGonagall, who was taking great, steadying gasps, clutching her chest. Fawkes went whooshing past Harry's ear and settled on Dumbledore's shoulder. But Harry barely registered any of this. He was looking at the figure standing slightly apart from the others, Professor Snape, whose face showed an expression Harry had never seen before. Relief, mingled with something that almost looked like pride. "You saved her. You saved her. How did you do it?" Mrs. Weasley was crying, still holding Jinny. "I think we'd all like to know that," said Professor McGonagall weakly. Harry hesitated, then placed the sorting hat, the ruby-encrusted sword, and what remained of Riddle's diary on Professor McGonagall's desk. Then he started telling them everything. For nearly a quarter of an hour he spoke into the rapt silence. He told them about hearing the disembodied voice, how Hermione had finally realized it was a basilisk in the pipes, how he, Ron, and Theodore had followed the spiders into the forest, that Aragog had told them where the last victim of the basilisk had died, how he had guessed that Moaning Myrtle had been the victim, and that the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets might be in her bathroom. "Very well," Professor McGonagall prompted him as he paused, "so you found out where the entrance was, breaking 100 school rules into pieces along the way, I might add, but how on earth did you all get out of there alive, Potter?" So Harry, his voice now growing hoarse from all this talking, told them about Fawkes's timely arrival and about the sorting hat giving him the sword. Then he faltered. He had so far avoided mentioning Riddle's diary, or Ginny's involvement. She was standing with her head against Mrs. Weasley's shoulder, and tears were still coursing silently down her cheeks. What if they expelled her? Harry thought in panic. Riddle's diary didn't work anymore. How could they prove it had been he who'd made her do it all? Instinctively, Harry looked at Dumbledore, who smiled faintly, the firelight glancing off his half-moon spectacles. "What interests me most," said Dumbledore gently, "is how Lord Voldemort managed to enchant Jinny, when my sources tell me he is currently in hiding in the forests of Albania." "What's that?" said Mr. Weasley in a stunned voice. "You know who? Enchant Jinny? But Jinny's not. Jinny hasn't been, has she?" Something went wrong with this response. Please try again. Trace ID, BAFC 8523-0197CH2 please the end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.